Chapter 1. A person's life came in many different forms. Everyone's life was different, but if one thought about it carefully, they would all be similar. It was like fate's joke. However, fate would often play a little joke on people. The sun slowly rose, and sunlight shone on every corner of the earth. A new day had begun, and people began to move. In an ordinary house, a teenager who looked to be about 16 or 17 years old pressed the buzzing alarm. He sat up and paused quietly. A few minutes later, he got out of bed. He first washed up and quickly made breakfast. After finishing breakfast, he packed his bag, put on his school uniform, took the key, locked the door, and left. The teenager's name was Wuming. Because he was an orphan, he was picked up by the director of an orphanage who did not know how to give names. Coincidentally, the director's surname was Wu, so he was given such a strange name. However, Wuming was not famous when he was young, but in the process of growing up, Wuming became a problematic child. Fortunately, there was a decent director of an orphanage who took him in and taught him. Other than being a little mischievous, Wuming could be considered a normal person. The director of the orphanage was a lonely old man. When he adopted Wuming, he was 70 years old. He let Wuming go to school before he was old enough to go to school. Until now, Wuming was 16 years old and was in his third year of high school. However, not long ago, the director of the orphanage passed away at the age of 86. Wuming did not cry when the director passed away. Many people were surprised by this, but in reality, this was not the case. Before the director passed away, he had spent some time alone with Wuming. People thought that this was to give him his last inheritance. The director did indeed give Wuming something, a jade pendant amulet. However, most importantly, the director said to him, "I know that your heart is not bad. I cannot give you fatherly or motherly love, but you are a strong child. No matter what path you take in the future, I hope that you will not forget your own heart. Don't cry for me after I leave." Due to the old principal's teachings and his own reasons, Wuming's heart was tougher and stronger than the average person. Because of this toughness, Wuming did not cry. However, if one were to observe closely, they would notice that after the old principal's death, Wuming's entire personality was exceptionally gloomy, just like an injured beast. Due to the upcoming college entrance examination, Wuming's gloominess had almost disappeared. A year ago, the old dean had said that he wanted to see Wuming get into a good university. The old dean did not have the chance, but Wuming still remembered that the college entrance examination was in a week's time. However, Wuming's heart did not waver. To be precise, it was because Wuming was too smart. When Wuming was first picked up by the old principal, the number of times he cried and threw tantrums was obviously much less than other children his age. No, it was terrifyingly little. During the period when Wuming was growing up, the old principal had discovered Wuming's talent when Wuming was 3 years old. The old principal had bought some preschool education books, and in just a year, the old principal had discovered that Wuming's knowledge was comparable to that of a second-grade elementary school student. Therefore, the old principal had used some legal means to send little Wuming to a local primary school. He had even specifically instructed little Wuming not to appear too smart. Because little Wuming was a problematic child, although little Wuming was always first in his exams and did not appear on the news, he was still known as a problematic child prodigy by the locals. Time flew by in the blink of an eye. The college entrance examination was over, and the results were out. Wuming was undoubtedly the top scorer in the college entrance examination. Just like that, on the day little Wuming received his acceptance letter, he packed his luggage and boarded the train to the capital. However, when the train arrived at the station, no one noticed that there was actually one less person on the train. In a dark tunnel filled with dazzling starlight, a young man was slowly floating in an unknown direction. Wuming opened his eyes and looked at the space-time tunnel that was filled with flowing light. His eyes were filled with curiosity and excitement. After a while, a low moan sounded. "Am I not human?" Wuming said indifferently. "That's right." Wuming was actually not human, but a creature born from the roots, the root dragon. In fact, the jade amulet that the old principal had given Wuming on the day of his death contained a scale. This scale was the key to unlocking Wu Ming's identity. This key conveyed information to Wu Ming in the form of dreams when he slept at night. In the dark vortex, a faint light was scooped up by a great power. After signing a contract, it was sent to another world. After that, the light turned into a baby and floated in front of the old principal's door. The child held a pale golden scale in his hand. When the old principal picked up the child and touched the scale, the old principal received the message of Wu Ming's birth stored in the scale. As a modern atheist, the scene just now had a considerable impact on the old principal. However, this did not affect the old principal's decision to take in Wu Ming. After taking in Wu Ming for some time, he realized that the scale seemed to receive the message no matter who touched it. Therefore, the old principal learned the technique of making amulets and wrapped the dragon scale in artificial jade to make it into an amulet. It was also because he knew about Wu Ming's identity that the old principal did not express any opinion about Wu Ming's inhuman talent. He even specifically reminded Wu Ming not to appear too smart. Although Wu Ming did not like to talk and did not have many facial expressions, this did not mean that Wu Ming had a personality flaw. Well, it was just a little. This was the price of being born from the roots in exchange for unparalleled talent. Wu Ming knew that as a higher and more mysterious being, he could not live in a world without any mysteries. In the end, Wu Ming decided to leave the world that raised him. And the way to leave was through Wu Ming's contract with a greater power. Simply speaking, Wu Ming had signed a contract with the restraining power of the M-shaped moon world. However, this was not the case. Wu Ming was still connected to the roots. This root was not the same as the one that was connected to Wu Ming was the common root of all worlds, known as the greater root. The root of the M-shaped moon world was merely a lower product of the greater root, known as the lesser root. If not for an accident, Wu Ming should have been an origin dragon born in the greater root, but he was born in the M-shaped moon world's root. This way, the restraining power of the M-shaped moon world could be said to have picked up a bargain. For Wu Ming, whether he was born in the greater root or the lesser root, the nature was the same. This was because the greater and lesser roots originated from the same root, so it would not affect Wu Ming himself. If there was an effect, it would be that the birthplace was different. Now, Wu Ming was heading towards the M-shaped moon world, which was the world he was born in. Because he was not familiar with the space-time tunnel, Wu Ming lightly touched a bright spot on the tunnel wall. Instantly, Wu Ming disappeared. Chapter 2. After being sucked into the space-time tunnel, Wu Ming fainted. When he woke up, he found himself lying on the ground, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that Wu Ming was shocked when he saw the sky. The sky was gray, just like the kingdom of the dead, Wu Ming said slowly. Seems like you have good eyesight, a female voice said. Wu Ming turned his head and saw an extremely beautiful woman. She looked to be around 20 years old. Her body was wrapped in a black and purple tight suit. Very few parts of her body were covered in light armor. Her purple hair reached her waist and swayed in the wind. She slowly walked towards Wu Ming step by step. You're clearly a living person, yet you've entered the country of shadows. Seriously. As if she had noticed something amiss, her purple eyes focused and looked carefully. Smiling, she said, so that's how it is. An origin dragon? It seems that even the heavens are helping me. May I ask where this is? And who are you? Out of caution, Wu Ming was very polite, but he didn't let his guard down just because the other party was a woman. Yes, although she's very beautiful. Oh, you seem to have accidentally barged in. Origin dragon, don't you know me? She said. Seems like she's a big shot, Wu Ming thought. I'm sorry, I really don't know how I got in, and I don't know who you are. Then from today onwards, you are my first disciple. I am Skaha, the queen of the demonic realm, the gatekeeper of the kingdom of the dead. Scat hack. Wu Ming was shocked. As the top scorer of the college entrance examination, Wu Ming was naturally well-read. Of course, he knew about the demonic realm, one of the Celtic mythological secret realms. The queen of the demonic realm, the powerful god of war and gatekeeper, Skaha. Skaha had a keen eye that could see through the qualities and temperament of others, especially if the other party was mortal or not. It was also because Wuming was the origin dragon that Skaha couldn't see through Wuming's qualities and temperament at first glance. Naturally, he also knew Skaha's sad wish, to let someone else kill her. And as Skaha couldn't find anyone who could kill her, he decided to nurture someone who could kill him. According to what Skaha had said about his first disciple, it seemed that Skaha had just come up with the idea of nurturing someone who could kill him when he met the talented dragon of origins Wuming. Skaha chuckled when he saw the shocked expression on the dragon's face. It seems that you do know who I am. So, are you willing to be my disciple, weak origin dragon? Yes, I'm willing, master. Wuming agreed after thinking for a while. Wuming urgently needed an opportunity to become stronger, and now that there was an opportunity to become stronger in front of him, how could he let it go? Wuming wasn't angry at being called weak. In fact, it was the truth. He was born not long ago, less than 20 years old, and was very weak. He couldn't even perform the most basic of root dragon abilities. He could only transform into human form with the help of suppression. All in all, he was quite weak now. This was also the reason why Wuming decided to leave that mysterious world. The greater the danger, the greater the opportunity. In that world, as the dragon of origins, Wuming couldn't gain any strength. Of course, that was true if his brain wasn't considered as strength. Very well. I believe that if it were you, you would definitely be able to fulfill my wish, Skaha said with a smile. Skaha smiled and said, remember, when you have the ability to kill me, don't hesitate to kill me. This smile made Wuming feel very sad. Just like that, the news of the young origin dragon becoming the first disciple of the queen of the demonic realm was spread throughout Celtic by Cuchulainn. The next morning, Wuming walked out of a small wooden house and looked at the sky. I'm used to seeing clear skies and white clouds. I'm really not used to such a dark sky. Yesterday, Skaha brought Wuming here and said, you can rest for the night. Training will officially begin tomorrow. After that, he didn't care about Wuming's feelings and walked away. Seriously, is he too excited because he found a chance to kill me? Wuming thought of that poignant smile again. While he was thinking, a spear suddenly fell from the sky and stabbed into the ground in front of Wuming. Exclamation point. Wuming was so scared that he took a step back. This is? Wuming looked at the silver holy spear. The spear emitted holy magic. As the dragon of origins, Wuming could naturally sense the magic emitted by the spear. Today, your mission is to gain the approval of this spear, Skaha said as he walked over from afar, ? Gaining the approval of the spear doesn't seem to be that easy. Wuming thought. This is actually transformed from the core of the Yggdrasil. As I'm used to using spears, I transformed it into a spear. Skaha paused and continued, if you don't want to use a spear, you can change its appearance after you've gained its approval. However, you have to remember that once you've approved of the appearance that you've chosen, it won't change anymore. Instead, it will evolve again and become a relic, the noble phantasm. Noble phantasm. Wuming was familiar with this term. When he was born, the dragon's scale also transmitted the basic knowledge of the M-shaped moon world to Wuming's mind. In the M-shaped moon world, a noble phantasm was the ultimate weapon of a servant. It was the miracle of materialization, the proof of heroism held by the servant, the crystallization of the human's yearning for miracles, and the strongest weapon known as the noble phantasm. It was similar to magic but more advanced as it was a weapon made from the human's imagination. It was the weapon, symbol, and unique skill of a servant. Of course, it was also a good weapon, and it could also be a skill. Of course, it was also denied that it was an object that was not refined by the human's imagination. In fact, many noble phantasms were transformed from ordinary soldiers. Other than skill noble phantasms, all kinds of weapon noble phantasms existed before. After being refined by the human's imagination, it became the noble phantasm. All in all, the noble phantasm was the trump card. It was a very effective life-saving method for the young dragon of origins Wuming. Now, even if Skaha did not let Wuming get the spear, Wuming would not agree. Okay, master, watch me. Wuming smiled, and there was a hint of vertical pupils faintly appearing in his eyes. Oh, then I'll wait and see, Sira. Because of the name Wuming, Skaha thought that Wuming equals silence equals silence. Wuming emphasized more than once that he was Wuming, not silence. God knows why Skaha spoke modern English. Was it because he was outside the timeline, so he could speak modern English? By the way, when Skaha and Wuming met for the first time, they also spoke modern English. Skaha convinced Wuming with the reason that, if we speak ancient Celtic, you definitely won't understand it. It's a weak origin dragon full of modern flavor. Wuming took a deep breath and exhaled. He walked forward, held the spear with both hands, and closed his eyes. At that moment, there was only one thought in his mind, the path of the strong, I'm coming. Just like that, Wuming began to practice. Chapter 3. In the magical realm the sky was still dark, giving people an indescribable feeling. In the silent forest, it gave people a sense of oppression. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound. Roar. Then came the roar of a beast. However, this voice sounded like the desperate cry of a beast on the brink of death. Plop. The corpse of a 5-meter-tall black tiger fell to the ground. A young man stood in front of the tiger's corpse. He brandished his spear and carried it on his back. Phew. I've finally completed the task given to master. This was Wuming, who was Baskahar's master. At this time, Wuming had been apprenticed to Baskahar for 3 years. 3 years ago, Wuming used 7 days to obtain the approval of the Spear of the World Tree and completed the weapon's final form. Because Wuming had no prior experience in martial arts, Wuming didn't deliberately change the shape of the weapon. It was still a spear. After that, Baskahar focused on Wuming's physical and magical characteristics as the Dragon of Origin and first laid the foundation for Wuming. During this year, he also taught Wuming the 18 primordial lune. As the Dragon of Origin, Wuming had a very high affinity with magical power. In layman's terms, it was a talent for learning magic. What was called magic in other worlds was called magic in the mid-moon world. Magic was a phenomenon that transcended common sense. It's a general term for artificially recreating mysteries and miracles. This was the evaluation of magic. Magic in the mid-moon world was in a more awkward position. The more people knew, the weaker the magic. For example, if everyone knew Fireball, then Fireball could only be used as a flame. If only one person knew Fireball, then he only needed to use a little magic to release a super large fireball that could destroy a village. Of course, the power of the magic was related to the amount of magic used. Wuming used 3 months to completely memorize and master the 18 primordial lune. He also learned some Celtic language to communicate with the outside world. As for the lune rune, although Wuming was still not proficient in it, his proficiency in it had already shocked Skaha. As expected of the Dragon of Origins, Skaha had said back then. In the next 2 years, Wuming continued to learn from Skaha's wisdom and martial arts. Apart from spear arts, Wuming also learned how to use other common weapons such as swords, bows, and shields. After 3 years, it could be said that Wuming had inherited all of Skaha's skills. Therefore, as his master, Skaha began to assign tasks to Wuming. The first thing Wuming had to face was a black tiger at the magical beast level. It was the corpse from earlier. Wuming glanced at the black tiger's corpse and realized that it had already turned into ashes and disappeared with the wind. As expected, the dead in the kingdom of the dead cannot be completely killed. Of course. The black tiger's corpse seemed to have turned into ashes, but in fact, it had returned to its previous residence. The residents in the kingdom of the dead wouldn't die again because they had already died. Of course, if there were methods that targeted the soul or instant death, they could also be killed. Let's go. Wuming turned and left, as if he was talking to himself, or to the others. After a short while, Skaha appeared out of thin air and the surrounding lune runes disappeared. This was the rune's way of concealing one's aura. Have you discovered me? You're from the origin after all. You've grown so much in just 3 years. Not bad, my lovely disciple. Skaha seemed to have thought of something and smiled. Seems like my wish can come true. After that, he arranged a few more runes around himself and disappeared. Master, I'm back. Wuming returned to the place where he had descended. There were already 2 wooden houses built here. Wuming knocked on the door of one of the houses and shouted. Skaha opened the door. As expected of Sira. That magical beast didn't affect you at all, Skaha said with a smile. Of course. I'm the first disciple of the Queen of the Ink Realm. How could that little cat stop me? Wuming pretended to be calm. His expression didn't change at all, but the pride in his voice was obvious. As for the name, Wuming didn't care. He would just treat it as a name from the Celtic region. Alright, come in and eat. I have a task for you after dinner. After that, Skaha turned around and walked into the house. Although Skaha was his master, he felt more like a big sister to Wuming. Wuming had a rare smile on his face. In a forest, Wuming carried his luggage and held the spear of the world tree. He looked up at the sky and said, "It's been more than 3 years since I saw the blue sky. How I miss it." Wuming recalled Skaha's words. You won't grow even if you continue to stay here. From today onwards, go out and train. I hope you can fulfill my wish when we meet again. Even if I have the ability to kill you, I won't, Ma. Sister Skaha. In fact, Wuming lacked love. Before meeting Skaha, Wuming only had one relative, and that was the dean. Wuming became a problem child because there was no one around who could accept him, especially after he discovered that he was different from others. After the dean's death, Wuming left that world without hesitation after fulfilling the dean's last wish. Because of Wuming's personality, both his teachers and classmates treated him as a problem child. Only his neighbors treated Wuming better. Therefore, Wuming didn't miss leaving that world at all. However, during the 3 years he lived with Skaha, Wuming experienced a different kind of care from the dean. Wuming and Skaha didn't only have a master-disciple relationship, but also a brother-sister relationship. Skaha also saw it. She didn't expect Wuming, who looked very modern, to be so pure and simple. As it was her first time taking in a disciple, not only did Skaha have a fondness for talent, but she also developed a love for her younger brother. After all, Wuming's heart was so pure. This was the dragon of origins. The stronger something was, the purer it was. Being inexperienced, he didn't fit in with others due to his purity. Now, Wuming was facing a problem. He didn't know where he was. Master, you've really given me a good start, Wuming said with a wry smile. Then, let's fill our stomachs first. With that said, he walked into the depths of the forest. An hour later, in a cave deep in the forest, Wuming sat on a rock with a fire in front of him. On top of the fire were some wooden racks. Some meat and 2 huge bear paws were being roasted on the racks. Outside the cave was the carcass of a huge bear. I remember seeing bear paws in a book before. I wonder if they're delicious. Poor demonic bear. In fact, Wuming wanted to go to the depths of the forest to pick some wild fruits. Because of the powerful creatures in the depths of the forest, wild fruits were more abundant than in the periphery. He didn't expect to meet this demonic bear halfway. The bear wanted to attack Wuming, but it ended up as Wuming's dinner. While Wuming was roasting, he looked at the bear outside. This bear skin can be used to sleep. Just like that, night fell. Wuming welcomed the first night of his adventure. Chapter 4. The next day, Wuming embarked on his journey. He walked through forests and fought monsters. He passed by villages and was welcomed by the villagers. He escaped from a cave and was chased by a terrifying dragon. When he was tired, he would look for a cave or a big tree. When he was thirsty, he would look for a mountain spring or a stream. When he was hungry, he would pick some wild fruits and hunt occasionally. Skaha was undoubtedly an experienced warrior and teacher. He was able to teach an inexperienced modern person to become so experienced in 3 years. Of course, the reason why he could travel freely in this era was also related to Wuming's root dragon bloodline. In short, Wuming experienced many adventures that modern people would call fantasy. In the end, he came to a place called Connaught. Is this Connaught? Wuming was wearing a linen shirt. He carried a simple luggage and his approved gun. By the way, Wuming could not turn the gun into a noble relic. The gun could only be considered a secret treasure. Maybe it's because I'm not a hero, Wuming once said. In fact, Wuming did not have high expectations for his weapon to become a noble relic. After all, a noble relic was the crystallization of miracles. A few days ago, Wuming met a group of roadblocks. Wuming had a friendly conversation with them. They kindly pointed the way to the nearest country to Wuming. Connaught. I remember they said that the lord of this territory is called, what was it again? Tinny Mac Connie. I think that's the name. To be honest, the people who lived in the era of the gods, whether it was a lord or a king, a commoner or a noble, were all creatures who lived under the rule of the gods. From Silent Wonder's point of view, the gods of the West were just a race with strange and powerful powers. In fact, this statement was not wrong. Silent Wonder's master, Skaha, had killed too many gods in the past, which led to him being cursed by the dead god, turning him into a human without dying. In summary, Wuming entered Lord Tinny's mansion and had a friendly conversation. The Lord of Connaught was a smart man. Wuming successfully became a resident of the city and the Lord's bodyguard. God knew where Wuming was when he left the demonic realm. It was not easy for him to find a country. Wuming did not want to live in the open anymore. Who would want to live a life without a fixed residence when there was a good life? Wuming was the same. Just like that, Wuming settled down in the Connaught area. Because it was the era of gods, a large number of magical creatures roamed around. In contrast, there was a large number of people with powerful powers. They were the legendary heroes of the later generations. As the western region of Ireland, Connaught naturally had its own heroes. However, because Wuming had been wandering around for a while, some of the more powerful magical creatures in the depths of the area ran to the outskirts. These heroes could not resist them. Once, a magical creature that was close to the level of a phantasmal beast wreaked havoc in Connaught. When everyone was in despair, Wuming wielded the spear of Yggdrasil and used the Loon rune to kill the magical creature after a few rounds of battle. Since then, the great hero who slayed the powerful magical creatures to protect Connaught, Celander, spread throughout Ireland. As his battle style was incomparably violent, just like a giant dragon, Wuming was given the title of Dragon of Connaught. After that, Wuming realized that the spear of Yggdrasil in his hand had some slight changes. It was as if, because its master had become a hero, it had to be worthy of its master. It gave Wuming the feeling that it was going to evolve into a treasure artifact. During this period of time in Connaught, apart from practicing the Loon rune and honing his martial arts, Wuming also began to study the map of this world. This world was undoubtedly a world with a shaped moon. After coming to this world, Wuming's mana was connected to Wuming's origin. However, Wuming realized that he was now in the period between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD, which was the period of mythological history when the Ulster heroes and the Fiona Knights were active. According to Wuming's analysis, the mythological knowledge he learned in the previous world did not match in this world. For example, Wuming's master, Skahar, was not mentioned in detail in Celtic mythology. It only stated that Skahar lived in the Shadow Kingdom, one of the Celtic fairyland. She was the king of the netherworld that accepted the dead and spirits. She was also the gatekeeper of the Shadow Kingdom, a god of war who had the skills to surpass the divine realm. Due to killing countless spirits, humans, and gods, as well as having the skills to surpass the divine realm, she was cursed to be immortal. In the 3 years that he spent with Skahar, Wuming realized that Skahar was a gentle big sister next door when she was not training him. When she was training, she was an extraordinary queen. Wuming did not know about the others, but he liked the feeling of being a big sister to Skahar. This kind of familial feeling was only given to Wu Ming by the old courtyard. Wu Ming believed that this was not the only thing that was wrong. Therefore, he decided to leave Connaught and investigate the other regions. Just as Wu Ming decided to leave, the Lord of Connaught suddenly received a message from the King of Ireland. Princess Maeve, who was avoiding political marriage, was sent to Connaught to become the new lord. According to the historical records, Maeve was a polyamorous young lady who was engaged and married many kings and warriors. She was always a noble lady. Unlike Skahar's warrior queen temperament, Maeve had the temperament of a queen who controlled a country. In the myth, Maeve had announced the 3 requirements for becoming her husband, as well as her system of rotating husbands. In short, Wu Ming did not have a good impression of Maeve before he met her. As a person who had received modern education, Wu Ming did not like the character Mai Fu. However, this was also an opportunity to verify the differences between the mythological stories that Wu Ming knew and the characters in the Shape Moon world. After receiving the news, Wu Ming did not care about the former lord, Dini, who was making a fuss. The Queen of Connaught, Maeve, who started the long march to capture the bull in Ulster's greatest war. This is really interesting. Let me see the difference between you and the mythological record, Queen Maeve. Wu Ming said with a smile. On the other side, on the road to Connaught. In a carriage with an army escort. A beautiful girl with a perfect body like a goddess was sitting in the seat, muttering something. Sira, the dragon of Connaught, what a powerful and handsome name, and Maeve, the queen of Connaught, here I come, my little sigh. Wu Ming, who was far away in Connaught, suddenly felt a chill on his back, and his body trembled, but he did not care. In this way, Wu Ming welcomed the most difficult woman in his life. Chapter 5. Due to various reasons and the lack of transportation in Ireland at that time, Wu Ming learned from Dini that Maeve would only arrive in Connaught after at least a month. As the Lord of Connaught, Dini, who was going to retire in a month, told the envoy that he would welcome Princess Maeve warmly. Initially, Wu Ming thought that he was going to rebel, but Dini did not dare to do so. If he rebelled, the rest of the Irish territories would not hesitate to submit a petition to the King of Ireland to attack him. A bunch of old foxes. Wu Ming was speechless. Knowing that Maeve would take a month to reach Connaught, Wu Ming decided to go to the outskirts to train for a month. Wu Ming realized that the spear of World Tree in his hand was getting hotter after he defeated the monsters and guarded Connaught. The heat made Wu Ming feel comfortable, as if Wu Ming was a tree sprouting in spring. Therefore, Wu Ming decided to go into seclusion to upgrade his relic. Skaha said that strictly speaking, Wu Ming did not belong to this world. Therefore, Wu Ming did not need the human imagination of the later generations to sublimate his relic. As long as he had the opportunity and grasped it, he could upgrade his skills or weapons into a relic. This was undoubtedly a great piece of news. This gave Wu Ming an effective way to become stronger. Not far away from Connaught, Wu Ming found a cave where the monsters that Wu Ming had killed lived. He blocked the entrance of the cave with a giant rock and added a loon rune. After he was ready, Wu Ming began to upgrade the Spear of World Tree. I remember Master said that upgrading a weapon into a relic would only happen when there is an appropriate time. I still have to rely on myself. Wu Ming recalled. Then, Wu Ming sat on the ground with his legs crossed and wrapped the spear with magic power. It floated in front of Wu Ming. Just like that, in the dark cave, Wu Ming began to upgrade his first relic. Half a month later. Rumble. A mountain in the outskirts of Connaught was shaking as if there was an earthquake. It was accompanied by a thunderous sound. There was a giant rock at the foot of the mountain. There were cracks on the rock and a touch of green could be vaguely seen through the cracks. Crack. Crack. The cracks on the giant rock kept on cracking, making an ear-piercing sound. Boom. The giant rock exploded into small pieces of gravel. A 10-meter-tall tree grew out of the hole behind the giant rock. Finally, the noble phantasm has been upgraded. Wu Ming smiled. The gun in Wu Ming's hand had disappeared, but there was a white gauntlet on his left hand. The front part of the gauntlet extended out a tree branch, and the end of the branch was the towering tree. Yggdrasil of Yggdrasil, 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 Yggin, Yggdrasil, 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 Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil's real name was to reproduce the growth of the Yggdrasil. The length and direction of growth would be determined by the amount of magical power provided by the master. When Wuming broke the giant rock, he only used a little bit of magical power. Yggdrasil had grown so long. If he were to evaluate Yggdrasil with a relic level, Wuming estimated that it would be at least an A++ relic. Wuming cut the branch between the arm and the tree. The arm turned into a silver-white holy spear in a flash of light. Yggdrasil had some white mysterious runes all over the body of the spear. The tip of the spear became even brighter. After Wuming performed a set of spear skills, he put the spear behind his back and looked up at the sky. Caw caw. A bird-shaped demonic beast with a fleshy crown on its head was circling in the sky, making a strange sound from time to time. Hey you rascal, I'm in a good mood today and wanted to let you go. I didn't expect you to have designs on me. Wuming stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. His pupils vaguely looked like red vertical slits. Caw caw. The demonic beast seemed to have heard what Wuming said. It circled in the sky a few times and then swooped down towards Wuming. Great, I'll use you as a sacrifice today. Wuming's expression became unruly. When the bird-shaped demonic beast was close to Wuming, Wuming flew up and stabbed the holy spear in his hand like a poisonous snake. Caw. The bird-shaped demonic beast circled in the sky and kept swinging its body. Wuming stabbed the holy spear into the back of the bird-shaped demonic beast and grinned. Caw caw. The bird-shaped demonic beast swung its body and flew away. On the main road not far from Connaught, a group of soldiers was hurrying along. The soldiers surrounded a carriage in the middle, as if protecting the important person in the carriage. A person who looked like a captain stood in front of the carriage and said to the carriage, "Your Highness, we will reach Connaught in half a day." Is that so? Can we still speed up? An extremely charming voice came from the carriage. Your Highness, the soldiers have sped up their march according to your instructions and are nearing Connaught half a month in advance. The soldiers are already exhausted. Please allow me to request for a temporary stop to rest, the captain pleaded. All right, then let the soldiers rest for a while. Anyway, this little bit of time won't make a difference. The charming voice in the carriage sounded again. Yes, Your Highness. The captain obeyed. Thus, the entire group rested on the empty ground beside the main road. Not long after, a series of strange roars were heard. Caw caw caw. It was a flying demonic beast with two fleshy crowns on its head. It stopped roaring as if it was running away from something. Looking at its body, one of its wings was broken, and there were some bloodstains on it. It could only fly less than 3 meters above the ground. A demonic beast is attacking. Protect the princess. The soldiers stood up one after another and held the weapons in their hands. However, their trembling hands were not complimentary. After all, most soldiers would not be able to return from a demonic beast of this level. After all, the king did not expect there to be a demonic beast of this level in Ireland. Powerful demonic beasts would not live on the plains where humans lived. Weak demonic beasts were basically dealt with by the king's men or heroes. This demonic beast that was neither powerful nor weak was obviously not native to Ireland. It should have just arrived in Connaught not long ago. Caw caw. The demonic beast's eyes turned red. It could not understand why such weak humans dared to block its path. If it was not for that terrifying fellow behind it, it would definitely eat all the humans here. The bird-type demonic beast flew in a straight line and took away all the humans along the way. It forced its way into the middle of the army and seemed to be going straight through the group. Coincidentally, the carriage of the princess, who was being protected by everyone, was right in the middle of the group. As there were too many people around the carriage could not move at all. Just like that, when the bird-type demonic beast rushed to the front of the carriage, it flapped its intact wings and the entire carriage flew away in pieces. Your Highness. The surrounding soldiers shouted in panic. However, I was careless and let that demonic beast hold me back for a while. Since you have designs on me, don't even think about running away today. The arrogant voice of a young man was heard. Let's end this. Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil. The bird-type demonic beast suddenly froze and a patch of green appeared on its body. Puff. The demonic beast's body shattered and a towering tree soared into the sky. On the giant tree, the young man hugged the princess. The princess looked at the slightly arrogant young man in a daze and could not regain her senses for a long time. Chapter 6. My name is Maeve Federic, the Princess of Ireland. I am the most beloved princess of my father, Achu Federic. Since I was young, I have heard people saying that I am unruly. But I am talented. So what if I am unruly? If I become the queen of this country, I will definitely lead this country to prosperity and end this internal division. Now that the country is in an unstable state, my father decided to choose a few of his daughters from the 6 of us to marry lords who can stabilize the country. Ah, my pitiful father, do you really think that this method of marriage will work? To these nobles who only pay lip service, this is like giving them a windfall. Besides, I don't want to marry those lords who are old enough to be my grandfather. Thus, when I was married off by my father, I used my intelligence to escape. I returned to the royal palace to meet my father. My father knows my temper and my intelligence. Thus, he sent my other sister to marry that noble. My father thought that if she were to marry elsewhere, it would be the same result. In addition, my father dotes on me. In the end, my father decided to bestow me a territory, Connaught. He also allowed me to find my own husband. That is great. This way, I will be the queen of Connaught. I believe that under my wise leadership, the people of my territory will be happier. Also, I don't want to find my own husband. Those stinky men must be coveting my beauty. I must find a great hero who will not covet my beauty to be my husband. Oh right, I heard that a young hero has emerged in the Connaught region. His name is Sira. It is said that the hero wields a silver holy spear. When everyone was in despair, he killed the magical beast that was ravaging Connaught. No one could subdue it. Ah, how brave. I heard from others that he has black hair and black eyes. He has an imposing appearance and has a temperament that no ordinary person can have. When he fights, he is unruly. It is said that his eyes can turn into the vertical pupils of a wild beast. He is like a berserk dragon that bites his opponent. Ah, what a beautiful, brave, and violent hero. It must be because the heavens couldn't stand the afternoon anymore, so they sent you to save me. You must be the husband that the heavens chose for me, Maeve. Ah, my adorable little Sai, I'll be right there, right there, right there. You must wait for me in Connaught. Ah, right, since I am afraid that my little Sai will leave Connaught, then I have to speed up. I have to reach there in at least 10 days. I have decided. I will speed up the marching speed of the guards. Speed up according to the plan, we will only reach Connaught after a month. After half a month, I have only just arrived near the center of Connaught. Sai, these soldiers are really useless. In the future, I must build a strong army myself. Finally, I could see little Sai. I couldn't wait any longer. Just as I was about to give the order to speed up the march, the captain of the guards came to ask me to let the troops rest. Sai, that guard captain actually asked the army to rest. Do you know that you are delaying my time to see little Sai? We have rested many times along the way. In the end, I thought about it and decided to let it go. Seeing that they had escorted me along the way, I will let them rest for a while. After all, I am also a little nervous now, little Sai. Suddenly, the soldiers outside started to panic. Is there a magical beast attacking outside? How could it be? There shouldn't be any magical beasts of this level within the borders of our country. These magical beasts that are neither too strong nor too weak should have been wiped out. I can feel that the magical beasts are getting closer and closer to me. Am I going to die? I can't accept this. I haven't seen you yet, my little sigh. The carriage was smashed apart. Strange, why didn't I feel any pain? Due to fear, I closed my eyes. However, I could still feel that I was saved by someone. I could feel the warmth of the person who saved me. In a moment of carelessness, I actually allowed that male magical beast to entangle me for a while. You two, husband and wife, can forget about escaping today. Let's end this. Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil, that voice was so unruly. I opened my eyes that I had closed because I was afraid. What did I see? A young man with a slightly unruly expression. He held a silver-white spear in one hand and hugged me in the other. Standing on a huge tree, the sun shone on his face. Ah, this is such a sacred scene. He must be Sira. As expected, you are the husband that the heavens have arranged for me. My little sigh. Chapter 7. 3 months had passed since Wu Ming rescued my food due to an accident. After Wu Ming was carried back to the nest by the previous magical beast, Wu Ming found that there was another magical beast in the nest. It seemed to be a male and a female. The male magical beast probably wanted to join forces with the female magical beast to deal with Wu Ming. Unfortunately, they were not strong enough. Wu Ming was entangled with the male magical beast for a while, and the female magical beast escaped with injuries. When Wu Ming learned that the girl he saved was Maeve, Wu Ming was stunned. That's right, Wu Ming really didn't expect Maeve to come back so quickly. After knowing the reason why she sped up because she wanted to see the legendary hero Serence, Wu Ming felt helpless. To be honest, Wu Ming could not see that the arrogant genius girl he saved was the future Queen Maeve. By the way, it was not that Maeve did not have the ability to fight, but her ability was too weak. In addition, the situation was urgent at that time, and Maeve was in a state of fantasy, so Wu Ming saved the damsel in distress. Cough cough. To be honest, the hero saving the damsel in distress was indeed a cliché, but its effect was often effective on girls. Wu Ming was sitting on a boulder outside the city, meditating with his eyes closed. A girl was sitting next to him, staring at him intently. Until the veins on Wu Ming's head popped out. The girl was the current lord of Connaught, Maeve. In the end, Wu Ming sighed. Sigh, my lord, what are you doing? Wu Ming opened his eyes and turned to look at Maeve. Maeve smiled and said, I'm just observing the daily practice of my savior and husband. That's right, since Wu Ming accidentally saved Maeve, the idea of a heavenly husband had been deeply ingrained in Maeve's heart. God knows what this self-conscious girl was thinking. Wu Ming rubbed his forehead helplessly. He had to admit that my Fu was very beautiful and charming. As for her personality, from what Wu Ming had observed, my Fu had yet to grow into the arrogant queen my Fu who thought that all men would be addicted to her pomegranate dress. Right now, Maeve was just a rebellious and self-conscious little princess. In short, in summary, Wu Ming has no feelings for my Fu. How should I put it? Wu Ming was the dragon of origins, but he also had the lust of a dragon. However, Wu Ming's lust was temporarily suppressed by his other natures, resulting in Wu Ming's temporary sexual apathy. In addition, Wu Ming felt that Maeve was more like a naughty sister than a wife. With Wu Ming's help, Maeve had consolidated her political power in Connaught in the past 3 months. Because of Wu Ming's concern, Maeve recognized this heavenly husband even more. Maeve. What's wrong, little Sai? You're a smart person, you should know what I'm thinking. Little Sai, what are you talking about? It's so complicated, I don't understand. Then, there was a moment of silence. Wu Ming sighed. Maeve, I will be leaving this place soon. Maeve's beautiful face that maintained a smile froze for a moment, and her pupils dilated. I'm a traveler. The reason why I settled down in Connaught was to rest. Now, I have a new goal, so I'm preparing to leave. Is that so? That's great, but I won't let you go. I will use all my means to stop you. Wu Ming was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Maeve to be so direct. Then, I'll help you with something. How about letting me go? Maeve smiled as if she heard what she wanted. Deal. 7 days later, Wuming received the news that Connaught had been humiliated by borrowing the Ulster Divine Bull and was preparing to attack Ulster. Wuming laughed bitterly. Maeve, so that's what you're planning. This reminded Wuming of the long march to steal the bull. In the original novel, Maeve and her chosen husband were competing to see who was wealthier. She wanted to borrow the brown divine bull from the Ulster region. However, because the messenger was drunk and arrogant, he said that he would attack Ulster if he didn't borrow it. This made Cooley, who wanted to borrow the bull, back out. In the end, the war between Connaught and Ulster began. But that was many years later. With Maeve's current reputation and the strength of her soldiers, it was impossible for her to attack Ulster. It was likely that she would lose again and surrender. Therefore, Wuming guessed that Maeve would come back to him for help. After winning this war, Wuming could leave. Sir Wuming, the Overlord is looking for you. A soldier came to Wuming's door and said. As expected. Got it. I'll go over right now. With that, Wuming opened the door and walked towards Maeve's meeting hall. When he reached the meeting hall, Wuming found that there was no one inside or outside the door. Just as Wuming was puzzled, he sensed Maeve's presence. Maeve slowly walked to the main seat in the meeting hall. Wuming did not stand on ceremony and sat beside Maeve. I already know the general situation. But with the military strength of Connaught now, it's impossible to compare with the powerful Ulster. If you want me to lead the Connaught soldiers to attack, I think it's better to forget about it. Wuming went straight to the point without hesitation. Don't worry, little Sai. I definitely won't fight an unprepared war. Do you remember the blood I asked you for the other day? Wuming recalled the day when Wuming and Maeve reached an agreement. Maeve wanted to Wuming to provide some essence blood. Wuming was not worried that Maeve would use some strange magic to control him. Maeve would not do that. She would not be Maeve if she did. Oh. What's the use of the blood? Wuming asked. Of course it's useful. I have a secret technique that can use a man's essence blood and my presence to quickly produce and nurture powerful warriors. Of course, although it's called production, it's actually the cyborgs produced through my hands and your essence blood. The strength of the cyborgs depends on the strength of the person who provides the essence blood. Therefore, I believe that with the soldiers produced from Little Sai's blood and my magic, our soldiers will definitely be invincible. Maeve said with a smile. Cyborgs. Wuming was not against the cyborgs. He was just a little repulsed. Then, when will the war begin? 7 days later. Maeve said. I'm going out to train in the next few days. I'll be there on time. After that, Wuming got up and walked out of the door. Okay, little Sai. Maeve said with a grin. If Wuming remembered correctly, after this war, it would be the time of Maeve's death. It was also a symbol of Ireland's weakness at this moment. However, because of Wuming, the long march to take the bull had been brought forward. Although it was not long, it was not short either. The outcome was still uncertain. Whether Cuchulainn would return from his studies, whether the King of Ulster would change, whether Fergus would still defect to Connaught, these were all unknown. However, Wuming was looking forward to it. His arrogant face appeared on his face again. Maeve smiled. She could see Wuming's arrogant face clearly from her seat. Ah. My little Sai, you're amazing. Chapter 8. 3 days later, Wuming saw the cyborg soldiers. Because they were cyborgs born from Wuming's blood, these cyborgs were more or less similar to Wuming in terms of appearance and temperament. Also because they were Wuming, the lifespan of these soldiers was much longer than that of ordinary cyborgs. Because Wuming and Maeve were leading the troops together, Wuming was asked by Maeve to say some motivational words in front of the soldiers. Wuming knew that he was not cut out for that, so he simply said a few words and left. Just like that, 4 days passed quickly. The day of war had arrived. The place where the two armies first fought was a plain. In the past, it was full of vitality, but today, it was gloomy because of the murderous aura. All troops, attack. With the command of both commanders, the soldiers of Connaught and Ulster began to charge. Wooming led the soldiers of Connaught. He charged at the front, while Maeve commanded from the rear. Sure enough, as soon as the war began, the Ulster army retreated in defeat. They could not resist the cyborgs of the Connaught army and Wooming who led the charge. Sure enough, Cuchulainn hasn't returned yet. TSK. What a bummer. Wooming stood on the battlefield, watching the Connaught army constantly encroach on the Ulster army. The Ulster army retreated, which made Wooming become arrogant again. His pupils turned into a dragon, and he looked very excited. Wooming called this state dragonization. Wooming had already known about his change, but he did not deliberately suppress it. When Wooming awakened his birth memories, he already knew that during the period when he was not fully grown, he would develop a series of negative effects similar to that of a dragon. These negative effects would constantly be triggered. The only way was to adapt to these effects and control them. Forcibly suppressing them would only have the opposite effect. Fortunately, these negative effects would only appear once at a time. After they appeared, the next negative effect would only appear once he had completely adapted to and controlled them. By the way, the obscenity mentioned before was temporarily suppressed because of this. Wooming returned to Maeve's side. Wooming no longer needed to lead the army. Firstly, the Connaught army that was pursuing the Ulster army would be ordered to retreat by Maeve soon after the pursuit. Secondly, Wooming did not have a strong leader or soldiers. Wooming's dragonization was completely inspired by the war and the excitement of being able to fight against enemy heroes. Now that the excitement was gone, Wooming returned to his usual state. Maeve, from the looks of it, Connaught will be victorious very soon, Wooming said calmly. That's not necessarily the case. Little Sigh, the enemy's powerful hero hasn't appeared yet. Don't underestimate them. Maeve stood on the chariot and smiled at Wooming who was beside her. Is that so? I'm looking forward to it. Let's leave it at that for today. Messenger, pass down the order to withdraw the troops for the time being. Don't pursue. Maeve said to the messenger beside the chariot. Yes, Your Majesty. After saying that, he walked away. Your Majesty. You have such a bad taste, Maeve. Wooming heard it and smiled helplessly. What's wrong? Is it strange that I'm a queen? I'm the Queen of Connaught, Maeve said. It's fine, it's fine. It suits you, Queen Maeve. Wooming said with a smile. Let's go. Understood. Just like that, the first day of the war ended. Connaught marched towards Ulster with overwhelming strength. In the next 7 days, Ulster retreated in defeat. When they were about to lose half of their land, the hero named Cuchulainn returned from his training in the Country of Shadows. He said that he wanted to have a good fight with his senior, Sira, in the war. When Wooming heard the news, he instantly became excited and almost dragonized. Wooming was very excited. He was about to fight with the half-human, half-god hero of the Celtic people, the son of the sun god Ruger, the son of light, Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn's original name was Sertant. When he was young, he killed the guard dog of the wealthy merchant, Coden, with his bare hands. He said, if this dog has offspring, I will be responsible for raising it and train it to be an equally powerful and loyal guard dog. Until then, I will protect you. Therefore, Sertant was called Coden's fierce dog, or Cuchulainn. When Cuchulainn was young, he entered the demonic realm and was recognized by the queen of the demonic realm, Skaha. Skaha imparted all her knowledge and martial arts to Cuchulainn, and he successfully walked out of the demonic realm. He shone brightly in the long march of the bull and was remembered by later generations. Wooming was not worried that Skaha would not teach Cuchulainn well after getting the chance to kill him. Skaha was not that kind of person. The longer a person lived, the more easygoing they would be. Skaha was the same. But she was also a warrior, and naturally would not give up on cultivating and teaching good seedlings. Therefore, Wooming was looking forward to the battle with Cuchulainn. Soon, the second day arrived. Because they were deep in Ulster, the marching speed of the Connaught army was now very slow. One side was ambushed by the enemy, and Wu Ming had already retreated to the rear to protect Maeve. Because there was no hero comparable to Wu Ming did not deliberately ask to fight. Of course, this was also Maeve's arrangement. Now, Cuchulainn was back. He was very powerful and often harassed the Connaught army, making their marching speed ridiculously slow. Therefore, when Wu Ming wanted to fight, and Maeve decided to send Wu Ming to deal with Cuchulainn because of the battle situation. Then, Maeve decided to go to the front line with Wu Ming. First, to boost morale, and second, to prevent Fergus of the Ulster army from sneaking into the rear to kill Maeve. Wu Ming retreated to the rear for this reason. Fergus of the Ulster army also understood this and stayed by the side of the King of Ulster to protect him. Maeve followed to the front line, and it was convenient for Wu Ming to protect her. Soon, Wu Ming and Maeve arrived at the front line. They received a letter of challenge from Cuchulainn to a one-on-one fight with Wu Ming. After receiving the letter of challenge and persuading Maeve, Wu Ming came to the place where he and Cuchulainn had agreed to fight. It was a relatively wide grassland near the battlefield. Wu Ming came to the back and saw Cuchulainn standing on the grassland, looking in his direction. Wu Ming also looked at him. Then, in the next moment, the two figures disappeared at the same time. Two figures appeared in the middle of the grassland, their spears touching each other. Wu Ming's face was full of excitement. His pupils became vertical, and it was obvious that he had activated dragon form. On the opposite side, Cuchulainn also bared his teeth and grinned, looking ecstatic. The two of them had never met before, but as if their hearts were linked, they laughed. "You must be Sira. You must be Cuchulainn." Chapter 9. Ever since Wu Ming left Connaught, he first hid his identity and traveled to Ulster and Leinster. During this time, he also obtained some treasures for various reasons. Tools and objects obtained from fighting heroes, treasures, weapons, jewelry, gold coins, etc. When he obtained too many of these treasures, Wu Ming suddenly had an idea. He used some of the quality items to refine a space-type loon rune for himself. Wu Ming spent 7 days to complete the rune. Wu Ming fixed the rune on the wall of his hand and placed all the treasures, tools, jewelry, gold coins, weapons, including Wu Ming's Spear of the World Tree, into the rune. If the rune was damaged or disappeared due to external forces, the items within the rune would all scatter out. It wouldn't cause the items to disappear along with the rune. Now, Wu Ming was doing his final inspection in Leinster. Wu Ming stood on a cliff by the shore and looked into the distance. As expected, the historical stories recorded in my previous world don't completely match the ones in this world, Wu Ming said calmly. Actually, that wasn't the case. Due to the long history, the accuracy of the historical records was greatly reduced. In addition to various modifications in later generations, that was why Wu Ming encountered heroes in historical myths and legends that didn't match the ones recorded in history books. Wu Ming decided to go to Great Headland Island to take a look. Of course, this was just a simple trip to see the country that King Arthur had once ruled. When Wu Ming went on a punitive expedition against a demonic beast, he obtained an old set of armor in its cave. This armor was a full-body suit, including the head. Although this armor was old, it was still very sturdy. After Wu Ming inquired about it, he learned about the origin of this armor from an old man in a village. King Arthur's gift *********. This was found by the old man from the inner collar of the armor. The front part meant, King Arthur's gift, but the back part was too worn out to be seen. The old man said that this set of armor was brought by his grandfather from Great Britain. He originally wanted to sell it to a blacksmith in the big city, but who would have thought that the old man's grandfather would never return? When he heard that this set of armor was found in the cave of the magical beast that Wu Ming had defeated, the old man didn't say anything and just kept sighing. The old man gestured for Wu Ming to take this thing away, as if to the old man, it was a disaster. What interested Wu Ming more was that this set of armor could be worn by Wu Ming and fit him perfectly. Wu Ming, after cleaning the armor, put it on. Because of this, Wu Ming decided to go on a trip to Great Headland Island. Because it was a long time ago, the technology wasn't advanced. Wuming found a ship that could go to Great Headland Island a few days later. After Wuming paid some gold coins, the captain said that there was no problem at all. After a long journey that took half a month, Wuming finally set foot on Great Headland Island. His current location was the southernmost part of Great Headland Island, Wales. Because most of the west side of Great Headland Island was mountainous, Wuming's ship was headed to the southern part of England where there were more plains and more cities. Coincidentally, the legendary capital of King Arthur, Camelot, was in the southwest of Wales, not far from where Wuming landed. At night, Wuming arrived at the palace. Hearing that this was a palace that was transformed from King Arthur's palace, Wuming wanted to enter the palace library to see if there was any reliable information. As soon as he entered the palace, Wuming realized that there were many powerful knights. Wuming could defeat them, but Wuming would have to put in some effort. Because of Skaha, Wuming's various skills could be said to be at a higher level. Of course, in the eyes of those experts, Wuming was just showing off his slight skill in front of an expert. Therefore, Wuming's stealth skill came in handy here. Wuming seriously suspected that if he turned into a heroic spirit, he might be able to adapt to all 7 ordinary classes. As for those legendary adjudicators and avengers, Wuming didn't want to think about them. Outside the study, Wuming drew a few runes. After a wave of spatial fluctuations, Wuming entered the study. I have to say, the royal library is really big. Wuming specifically went to look for books that looked particularly old. Wuming summoned the light loon, and a ball of light appeared beside him. Wuming used the light of the ball of light to read the books. 7 days later, Wuming put down the book in his hand and let out a long sigh. Phew. Sure enough, reading is the most enjoyable. Wuming read for 7 days in a row. When he was hungry, he would take out the prepared food from the spatial runes. As a warrior, reading books was not tiring. Besides, as someone who was addicted to the sea of books, he wouldn't feel tired. It's almost time to go. I've almost finished reading all the information I wanted. Wuming only read about some things that happened after King Arthur was destroyed. Wuming found that in general, the King Arthur of this world was similar to the King Arthur that he knew. However, the King Arthur of this world had an additional knight that seemed unimportant, but was actually very important. Before King Arthur became king, he was asked by the previous king, King Uther, to assist King Arthur together with Mage Merlin. After King Arthur became the queen, he began to assist King Arthur. He was a knight and a mage. He often discussed the mysteries of spells with Wizard Merlin, and he often fought valiantly on the battlefield to help King Arthur devise strategies. He had a good relationship with all the knights, especially the rebellious knight Mordred. After the kingdom was stabilized, he left Camelot and began a new round of travel. Although in this world, Queen Guinevere did not fall in love with the first knight Lancelot, Lancelot still fell in love with the queen. When he was discovered, he ran away. This was the beginning of the end of King Arthur. Later, under the pressure of the people, King Arthur went to France to take Lancelot in. The rebellious knight Mordred took advantage of this opportunity to rebel. In the end, King Arthur was severely injured in the Battle of Camelot. Strangely, Wuming found the composition of a magic circle in an ancient book. It was written in the first Loon rune. What is going on? Why is there a Loon rune? Wuming could not figure it out. In the end, Wuming laid out the pattern of a magic circle. I happen to have the tools that make up the magic circle. Things are getting weirder and weirder. But let's see what's going on. Wuming injected his mana into the circle. The circle was activated, and a white light enveloped Wuming. Wuming did not even have time to react before he disappeared along with the circle. All that was left was a book that slowly turned to dust in the wind. Chapter 10. When Wuming found himself wrapped in a magic array, he knew that this was a high-level teleportation array. Then, Wuming ran the magic in his body to wrap his whole body. Wuming did not notice that there was a faint light spot on his armor. Why do I feel like I've been tricked by myself? For a moment, Wuming's eyes lit up, and Wuming closed his eyes. The feeling of stepping on solid ground came, and after confirming that he had arrived at the teleportation location, Wu-Ming opened his eyes. Because of the sudden teleportation, Wu-Ming hurriedly put on the helmet of the armor. There were two blade-like protrusions on both sides of the top of the helmet, extending backward, and the shape was slightly like a dragon's horn. The face was sealed, and only the eyes of the armor revealed a thin slit that did not affect the vision. Wu-Ming opened his eyes. He was now in a forest, and there were two people standing in front of him, one old and one young, one tall and one short. The former was tall, with a slight king's temperament, and his body looked very strong, but Wu-Ming still found that the old man's breath was not enough, and it was obvious that he would not live for long. The latter was wearing a white robe, holding a strange staff, and looked handsome, but his face was like a circle in Wu-Ming's eyes. "Is this the legendary dragon, Mage Merlin?" The old man obviously decided to find it strange. "He summoned a dragon, so why did a man come out?" "Your Royal Highness King Yusef, there is no doubt that this is the legendary dragon, I can assure you," said the mage named Merlin. Wu-Ming was wearing full-body armor, and his head was covered, so his face could not be seen, but Wu-Ming's heart was exploding at the moment. What is this situation? "King Yusef." "Merlin." Wu-Ming shouted in his heart. King Yusef thought for a moment, and took a rectangular wooden box from his back. He opened the wooden box, presented it in front of Wu-Ming, and said, "Legendary dragon, I am willing to use this celestial iron sword to ask you to protect Britain before the new king grows up. Please forgive my offense and agree to my request." Wu-Ming froze for a moment, looked at the celestial iron sword in the center of the wooden box, and was instantly embarrassed. "What kind of sword is this?" "This is a big iron block that looks like a sword." Of course, the magic contained in this big iron block was extremely amazing. Wu-Ming thought for a moment and did not say a word. Wu-Ming guessed that the legendary dragon they were talking about was probably the dragon, but Wu-Ming was not sure, so he denied his identity. However, Wizard Merlin pointed to a scroll on the ground and said, "This scroll is connected to another scroll, the legendary dragon summoning scroll. It has the dried blood of the legendary dragon, so it must summon the legendary dragon." Merlin's meaning made Wu-Ming have to bite the bullet. "Let's put this matter aside for now. Where is this place?" Wu-Ming changed the subject. "This is the forest on the outskirts of Camelot, the capital of Britain." Sure enough, that scroll sent me to the past. Wu-Ming thought in his heart. "Your Highness King Yusef, I can't guarantee that I can completely protect Britain, but I can promise that I will do my best to protect Britain from harm. What do you think?" Wu-Ming thought for a moment. Now that he was here, he had to find a place to stay. He could not just wander around aimlessly. "In that case, I will thank the legendary dragon on behalf of my British people." In this way, Wu-Ming was inexplicably brought back to Camelot by old Yusef and Merlin. 10 years had passed. 10 years ago, Wu-Ming joined the Knights of Camelot as a knight who trained alone in the mountains. He also became King Yusef's personal guard and was responsible for some matters that the knights could not handle, such as the attack of powerful magical beasts or the delay of the beheading operation when the enemy invaded. As for Wizard Merlin, Wu-Ming became friends with him. Moreover, Wu-Ming always felt that the mage named Merlin, who was not old at all, knew something. He was always smiling all day long. Sometimes, Wu-Ming would always punch Merlin in the face for no reason. Wu-Ming did not know how many times he had slapped him in the face. Wu-Ming did not want the sky iron sword, but King Yusef insisted on giving it to Wu-Ming. Wu-Ming had no choice but to accept it. Due to his identity as a knight, Wu-Ming's spear was not very suitable for him to use. Thus, he decided to forge this outer sky mysterious iron sword into a powerful sword. When talking about the sword, it was natural to talk about the armor. After talking about the armor, Wu-Ming was surprised to find that the armor on his body had completely changed after he was teleported. It became silver and shiny, completely unlike the shabby gray armor before. Wu-Ming carefully checked it. In addition to becoming brand new, the unclear text in the collar had disappeared. Speaking of which, Wu-Ming wanted to see what was erased later. Because Wu-Ming wore a bright white armor with a dragon-like helmet, and Wu-ming looked like a violent silver dragon in battle. Wu-ming was called the British Silver Dragon by the people. Because Merlin thought that Wu-ming was not suitable for this era, Merlin gave Wu-ming a name that was biased towards this era, Villo. British Silver Dragon, Villo. For the problem of the name, Wu-ming was already too tired to complain. Silver. Silver Dragon. Why do the people I meet always like to give me strange names? Wu-ming said helplessly. To be honest, the two words, Silver Dragon, always gave him a strange feeling. During this period, Wu-ming learned about the plan of King Yusuf and Merlin. Because the Roman Empire was invaded by foreign enemies, it was showing signs of decline and division. The British Isles, which were once the territory of the Roman Empire, fell into a state of internal strife. A few years ago, King Yusuf defeated King Fudikan. King Yusuf knew that he would not live for long, so he set up a foreshadowing early. He placed his hopes on the next generation of king, and his royal magician Merlin planned to create a new king who was born above mortals. They combined the blood of the British king, the ideology of Britain as the Red Dragon, and the noble female blood to perfectly integrate the two to create a mother fetus. In this way, the legendary King Arthur, Artoria Pendragon, was quietly born. He entrusted Artoria to a trusted noble knight and let the noble knight raise King Yusuf's child, which was King Arthur. During this period, Merlin would teach King Arthur all kinds of knowledge and fighting abilities to become a king in the dream. Finally, when King Yusuf died, it was the time for the new king, King Arthur, to lead the people. Wu-ming's character was to train and help King Arthur until King Arthur became a real king and no longer needed him. This was undoubtedly inconsistent with the historical story that Wu-ming learned. What made Wu-ming speechless was that the King of Knights, King Arthur, was actually a woman. This made Wu-ming, who had just learned about the plan, shocked. In the beginning, Wu-ming did not care about King Arthur. After a while, Wu-ming met King Arthur in the forest and showed his superb skills. From then on, Wu-ming had another brother, sister. Because Merlin was responsible for teaching King Arthur the ability to fight and be a king, therefore, Wu-ming basically had nothing to do except protect Britain when there was war or when there was an invasion of magical beasts. For a pure girl, Wu-ming decided that it was necessary for him to accompany King Arthur more and let him enjoy the joy of being a girl before he became a king. Chapter 11. In a forest, a young man, girl, with a slightly neutral appearance was training his thin and small body in the forest. Leah. The teenager, girl, stumbled and almost fell. Please don't call me that, Vi, the teenager, girl, said with a slightly red face. Ah. Leah, you've grown up. The little girl who used to follow me and call me brother has grown up. Wu-ming appeared behind Leah with a strange voice. Leah looked at Wu-ming angrily. All right. I haven't taken you out to play for a long time. I've specially asked for leave to accompany you today. Wu-ming said with a smile. Leah did not say anything. She looked at Wu-ming's eyes, wanting to say something but hesitated. What's wrong, Leah? My Leah is not the kind of person who is indecisive. Leah's face turned slightly red again because of the words my. Vi, I want to continue training today, so, let's postpone the trip for now. Leah said with a slight nervousness. Understood. Come back early tonight. Merlin and I have something to tell you. Wu-ming touched Leah's head again. To be honest, he loved that blonde hair so much that he could not put it down. Got it. Also, don't touch my head. Leah said with a red face. Ever since Leah was chosen by the British Silver Dragon, Leah moved out of her original home and lived in Wiz's house. Of course, this was Wu-ming's request. To put it nicely, it was to nurture an excellent knight. After saying goodbye to Leah, Wu-ming began to move northwest of Camelor. Finally, he walked to a mountain wall. Wu-ming raised his hand and drew a few runes in the air. The mountain wall in front of him rippled and revealed the entrance of a cave. Wu-ming walked in without hesitation. I wonder how the sword is being forged. Is Merlin reliable? Wu-ming said as he walked. I'm so sad, Vi. Are you that pessimistic? A charming male voice was heard. Because it was dark in the cave, the person's face could not be seen clearly. My fists are thirsty. Wu-ming raised his armored arm. Wait. Wait, don't slap my face for no reason. The man's voice was flustered and panicked. I'm kidding. Why are you so nervous, Merlin? Wu-ming said with a smile and lowered his fist. You mischievous fellow. Do you think I won't tell Ya your true colors? A young man wearing a white robe and a wooden staff walked out of the shadows. This person was the great wizard Merlin who had summoned Wu-ming 10 years ago. She trusts me more than you, Mage Merlin. Wu-ming kept walking into the cave. Forget it. You go take a look at the sword first. It's a crucial moment. Wu-ming and Merlin walked to the end of the cave. What greeted their eyes was a tall earthen furnace. There was a circular opening in the middle of the furnace, and one could see the interior of the furnace from the outside. Golden flames were burning in the furnace, and a bright silver sword was floating above the flames. Because it was burning, the bright silver sword was still moving like a sword-shaped liquid metal. Wu-ming bit his middle finger and immediately extended his hand into the furnace, placing his finger on the sword. Golden blood flowed onto the sword like water, wheezing and wheezing. After absorbing Wu-ming's blood, the sword shone even more brightly. The excess blood flowed from the sword into the flames, causing the flames to burn even more vigorously. Even Merlin, who was watching from afar, felt a pang of pain. I really don't know what you're thinking. If you want to use blood, just use it. Why use so much? Merlin shuddered. You still have the nerve to say that. You say that blood is a rare treasure, and that you add some to Leah's food every time you cook. It's for her after all. That's fine, but you want to use my blood to grow vegetables? Do you know how much blood I've lost? You despicable gardener. Wu-ming glared at Merlin. Merlin did not mind, and said with a smile, Oh, isn't this all for Britain? Ha 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 ha. TCH. I can't be bothered with you. Wu-ming focused on letting out the blood. After a while, Wu-ming's face turned pale, and his middle finger stopped bleeding. Wu-ming withdrew his hand and looked at the sword in the furnace quietly. Merlin did the same, and looked at the sword in the furnace quietly. Suddenly, the flames in the furnace began to burn fiercely, and the sword in the furnace began to absorb the flames wildly. Whoosh! The flames burned fiercely. After a while, the flames were completely absorbed by the sword in the furnace. The originally bright silver sword became even more dazzling. The corners of Wu-ming's mouth curled up, and he stretched out his hand. The sword floated into Wu-ming's hand by itself. Wu-ming looked at the sword that was connected to his blood and could not help but praise, as expected of the sacred sword of Meteor. Congratulations, Wu-ming, Merlin said from the side, and this time he used Wu-ming's real name. This is all thanks to you, Merlin. I express my gratitude to you here. Wu-ming bowed to Merlin. Ha ha ha. I didn't expect that there would be a day when you would bow to me. Ha ha ha. Merlin seemed to have seen something incredible, and he laughed while holding his stomach. By the way, I'm going to retreat for a while. During this time, I'll leave Britain and Leah to you. Wu-ming did not care about Merlin's laughter and said calmly. He decided to start turning this sword into his own noble artifact now. Ah. It's so sudden. I have no problem, but it's hard to explain to Leah. Merlin also stopped laughing, and now was the time to talk business. I'll tell Leah to go home early today, and then you can tell her that I'm going out to fight monsters. Also, today is the time to tell Leah about her background. Ah. I do the bad things, and the good things always come to you. It can't be helped, I'm just a mage. Merlin laughed evilly. Don't give me that. You're the British sword saint. Others may not know about it, but I do. Wu-ming looked at Merlin helplessly. Although Wu-ming practiced his spear skills every day, he basically did not use a spear in the past 10 years, and had been using mass-produced knights. Although Wu Ming and Skahar majored in spear skills, Skahar was also a master of other weapons. There was once when Merlin saw Wu Ming practicing his swordsmanship, and gave him some pointers. Unexpectedly, after being stunned for a moment, Wu Ming suddenly swung his sword at Merlin, and scared him so much that he blocked it with his staff. Only then did Wu Ming realize that Merlin's swordsmanship was very strong. After that, Wu Ming half-jokingly called Merlin the British Sword Saint. Ah! Don't talk nonsense, I'm not worthy of being called the British Sword Saint. Merlin said that he could not afford to be called the British Sword Saint, but he still showed a proud smile on his face. All right, stop talking nonsense. Let's go, and remember to seal the entrance of the cave when we reach it. Wu Ming waved his hand, indicating that he wanted to go into seclusion there. Come out as soon as possible, King Yusef can't hold on for much longer. I'll tell Lia about her background tonight. After saying that, Merlin turned around and left. Phew. Wu Ming took a deep breath and sat in front of the furnace with his back against it. Although the flames in the furnace had disappeared, the residual heat was still there. With Wu Ming's blood as the fuel, the residual heat of the flames could last for a long time. At this point, Wu Ming began to upgrade the sword's noble phantasm. Wu Ming had a premonition that the relic would be upgraded very quickly this time. Chapter 12. Wu Ming and Lia played crazily for the whole day, forgetting the time. When they came back to their senses, it was already sunset. Let's go, Lia. I'll personally cook today and make you a delicious meal. Wu Ming held Lia's hand and said with a smile. Well, I'm looking forward to it, Vi. Lia smiled brightly, like a gorgeous lily. Wu Ming was stunned. It seems that Lia is really tired these days. It's been a long time since I saw Lia smile like this. After returning home, Wu Ming made a sumptuous dinner for Lia under Merlin's resentful gaze. After eating with Lia asked to practice her swordsmanship and went to the backyard of the house. Wu Ming asked Merlin as he cleaned up the dishes. What's going on with King Yusef? Did he ask you to do this? Although it was a question, Wu Ming used an affirmative tone. Merlin sat on the wooden chair in front of the dining table and said without changing his expression, yes. Of course, King Yusef wanted it. When he knew that you had been in seclusion for nearly 3 months and had not come out, he decisively cut off the magic that I set up for him to maintain his life. He used the reason that since the legendary dragon could not protect my people and my land, then my descendants will protect them, to forcibly cut off the magic, and then he died suddenly. Merlin sighed. It was obvious that King Yusef wanted to do this from the beginning. If it were not for Wu Ming doing a good job these years, King Yusef would have cut off the magic that maintained his life earlier. Wu Ming put the washed dishes in the kitchen and sat opposite Merlin. Since I have made a contract with him, then I have a certain responsibility for his death. I will be responsible for Lia's coronation. Although Wu Ming had lived in modern human society for more than 10 years, it did not mean that he had become like a human. As the great origin dragon, Wu Ming did not want to break his promise. Even if he broke his promise because of an accident, Wu Ming would try his best to make up for it, not to mention that this was not breaking his promise. As expected of the legendary dragon, my dear friend, Wu Ming. In fact, Merlin hated humans. Therefore, for Merlin, Wu Ming, whose bloodline was the origin dragon, was a very good friend. As for the reason why Merlin hated humans, Wu Ming did not know. If Merlin did not say it, he would not ask. As for why Merlin would help King Yusef and teach King Arthur, Wu Ming did not know. When is the sword in the stone's sword drawing ceremony? Wu Ming asked. 3 days later. Finally, the new king is going to ascend the throne. This country, in the end, still has to rely on themselves to save it. Wu Ming sighed. Strictly speaking, Wu Ming and Merlin were not citizens of this country. Merlin had the highest level of magicians, clairvoyance, and he had long seen the destruction of King Arthur's dynasty. Wu Ming, on the other hand, was just a passerby. Wu Ming also knew that King Arthur's dynasty would be destroyed. Wu Ming wanted to stop this tragedy, but history had the power to correct it. Even if Britain was not destroyed in King Arthur's generation, it would be destroyed in the next generation. This generation would be the source of the destruction of the next generation. Wu Ming did not know if he would oppose Merlin in the future. First, Merlin was a trustworthy friend. Second, he was also a powerful wizard and swordsman. Based on these 2 points alone, Wu Ming did not want to fight with him. Merlin was the same. It was not easy to make a close friend. Who would want to fight with a sword? Time passed quickly. 3 days later, in the courtyard where the sword in the stone was located, the sword in the middle was covered by a red cloth. There was a sea of people here, and it was unusually crowded. Fortunately, the walls of the courtyard were net-shaped fences that did not obstruct the view. The courtyard was not small, and it could barely accommodate the knights who wanted the sword. Of course, there were people outside the fences. After all, the king's selection ceremony was very important. When everyone arrived, Merlin, who had been wearing the same clothes, appeared. He lifted the red cloth covering the sword in the stone, and the sword in the stone appeared in front of everyone's eyes. It was a very beautiful sword. Compared to a weapon, it was more like an ornament, a sword that the king did not need to fight. However, this sword was far from that simple. The sword was inserted into a square stone. Around the stone were written, "Whoever pulls out this sword, and is born here, is the king." The sword was also engraved with the inscription, "Only the king can take the sword in the stone." It meant that, only the king can pull out the sword in the stone. As the British silver dragon who had the most children after King Yosef, Wu Ming was the first to step forward and pull out the sword. Wu Ming knew that he could pull it out. After all, this sword was enchanted by Merlin. Wu Ming could still pull it out if he wanted to. Because it was just a formality, Wu Ming stepped forward and gently grasped the sword. He then let go and said with a smile, "It seems that I can't pull it out." The nobles were obviously relieved. Compared to the British silver dragon in front of them, they would prefer someone else to be the king. After all, Wu Ming had been at odds with these nobles for many years. However, the commoners and some of the knights were a little disappointed. Next, one by one, the knights stepped forward to pull out their swords. Some of them knew their limits and tried to pull out their swords lightly. Knowing that they couldn't pull it out, they stopped. Some of them hugged their swords tightly until their faces turned pale. Only then did they walk away unwillingly. Wu Ming saw all of this. He vaguely remembered the faces of those who didn't want to pull out the sword. He was going to recruit these people into the new order of knights. Since Wu Ming became a knight, Wu Ming had always believed that character was more important than strength. Not long after, almost all of the knights had pulled out their swords. There was only one special knight left, and that was Artoria, who was disguised as a man. Because to become a noble knight, one had to be an adult, and Artoria was obviously underage. For this reason, Wu Ming specially applied for a knight title for Artoria. Artoria also passed the test to become a knight, but the nobles still refused to let go because she was not old enough. As a result, Artoria was given a special knight title and became a special knight. Therefore, the commoners began to ask for a new king. Some wanted to use force to determine the winner, while others wanted Wu Ming to be the new king. This was what most people were shouting for. The nobles were instantly unhappy and immediately objected. What a joke! What was the difference between the two? Everyone knew that the British silver dragon was now the most powerful knight in Britain. Even King Yusuf might not be able to defeat the British silver dragon in force. Of course, for Wu Ming, who was gradually awakening the bloodline of the root dragon and had greatly improved his physical magic power, if a human could still defeat him, then he should find a piece of tofu and kill himself. Even if it was Cuculin, Wu Ming estimated that he could defeat him now. After all, Wu Ming had obtained the second noble phantasm. At this moment, no one was optimistic about the last night. After all, in the eyes of many who did not know the truth, Artoria became a knight because of the British silver dragon Villo. Just as the nobles were loudly objecting to using force to elect a new king, Artoria stood in front of the sword in the stone. She heard a voice. It was Merlin's voice. Before you pick up that thing, it's better to think carefully. Once you pick up that sword, you will no longer be a human until the end. You will be hated by all humans, and you will eventually meet a tragic death. Artoria looked at Wu Ming. She found that Wu Ming's eyes were full of support and trust. Then, she resolutely reached out and grabbed the sword in the stone. She pulled hard, clang, the sound of the sword being unsheathed echoed throughout the sky. At this moment, everyone, whether they were commoners or nobles, was silent. The commoners' eyes were full of hope, while the nobles' faces were full of confusion. "Greetings, King." The commoners and nobles were startled by the voice and looked at the source of the voice. Wu Ming knelt on one knee in front of Artoria. Obviously, he was greeting the new king. Then, almost all the knights followed suit and knelt down on one knee. "Greetings, King." The voices of the knights were united and resounded through the sky. When the commoners saw this, they hesitated for a moment. Then, they followed suit and knelt down, shouting, "Greetings, King." The nobles clearly wanted to quibble about something. Wu Ming did not even look at them and shouted again. "Greetings, King." This time, Wu Ming's wooming was mixed with magic. His voice rang in almost everyone's ears. The knights and commoners shouted together. "Greetings, King." "Greetings, King." "Greetings, King." This voice did not stop for a long time. The nobles looked at Artoria, who was holding the sword of the stone high in the sun. The nobles were influenced by the people and the knights. The knights and commoners also shouted together. However, the nobles' voices were still a little unsatisfied. "Greetings, King." Wu Ming looked at Artoria, who was surrounded by the sunlight and the commoners, and muttered. "King Arthur, Artoria Pendragon. A new king is born." Chapter 13. It had been 7 days since Artoria pulled out the sword in the stone. During these 7 days, the nobles were in a mess. They complained that the new king was too young. Under Artoria's worried eyes and Merlin's mocking eyes, Wu Ming visited all the nobles at night. After 7 days, there were no more objections. Instead, the nobles kept praising the new king for being young and promising. They even praised the new king for drawing his sword and calling it the will of God. At night, in the palace, Artoria and Wu Ming were dealing with documents in the meeting room, while Merlin was preparing for the coronation ceremony. Due to the lack of a king, Artoria started to deal with the documents in advance with Wu Ming's company. After dealing with the last document of the day, Artoria looked at Wu Ming. Wu Ming was also dealing with the last document. Artoria stared at Wu Ming, who was working on the documents in a daze. A strange light appeared in her eyes. When Wu Ming finished dealing with the last document, he noticed that Artoria was staring at him. "What is it, Lia? Is something the matter?" Vi, nothing. I just want to know how you convinced the nobles." "Merlin told me that the nobles are very difficult to deal with," Artoria asked with a red face. "Oh, you're talking about those nobles?" "It's very simple. I just told them, if you're against Al becoming the king, then I'll become the king. I believe that no matter if it's in terms of reputation, experience, or strength, I'm qualified. I believe that the people will also choose me." I told them that. Then, the nobles pretended that I was thinking about it, but in fact, they were already panicking. Now, they want you to be the king immediately. After all, it's easier for them to deal with you than me. Wu Ming got up and sat beside Artoria. "Of course, there are nobles who support you, such as your foster father Hector and your foster brother Kai. I'm going to form a new order of knights and invite them to join. After all, your foster father and foster brother are also very good knights." While talking, Wu Ming couldn't help but despise the nobles who opposed Artoria. They couldn't even see the situation clearly. What right did they have to be nobles? Sooner or later, they would be stripped of their titles. My foster father and foster brother. They were indeed excellent nights. Before I met you, my foster father was my role model and my foster brother had been competing with me in a friendly manner. Now that I think about it, it was a wonderful time. Artoria sighed with emotion. You have to get used to it. After all, you are going to be the king soon. Besides, you have me by your side. Wu Ming said as he patted Artoria's head. Artoria's face turned red again. Then she said, Don't worry. By the way, Vi, wouldn't it be better if you become the king? Artoria was a little nervous. Sigh. Why do you say that? Wu Ming was puzzled. Because you said it yourself. Whether it is reputation, experience, or strength, you are more suitable. Artoria looked into Wu Ming's eyes and said. Ha. Lia, you have to believe in yourself. Let's not talk about whether I am a local or not. Even if I am, I will not become the king. My favorite thing is traveling. How can I travel if I become the king? Wu Ming laughed. Artoria looked at Wu Ming's handsome face that didn't age at all. By the way, Vi, how old are you? I remember that I've known about you for as long as I can remember, Silver Dragon of Britannia, and all the other kings around me have acknowledged your existence, Artoria suddenly thought. In fact, there were many kings on the island of Britain today. Britain was originally ruled by Rome. Because of the civil strife in Rome, Britain became independent. However, at the same time, the disaster of the people came. Originally, it was the demon beasts. Now, there was war. Since Wu Ming was appointed by King Yusef and made a name for himself, he traveled around the island of Britain when Camelot was settled. At the same time, he saved many people and helped many kings. Naturally, the title of the British Silver Dragon appeared. My age. About 30 years old. To be honest, I can't remember the details. Wu Ming said casually. 30 years old. Are you really blessed by the legendary dragon, Vi? Artoria sighed in amazement. Wu Ming was laughing in his heart. Merlin once told the public that the British silver dragon Vilo Sarensfeld was a warrior blessed by the legendary dragon. He was also the knight of the king of Camelot who was guided by the legendary dragon. When he heard Merlin's words, Wu Ming was stunned. Wasn't the legendary dragon himself? When he came back to his senses, he immediately gave Merlin a punch. Thanks to this, Wu Ming's appearance did not change in the past 10 years. No one doubted it. Coupled with Wu Ming's kind temperament and powerful strength, the people of Camelot were very happy. Even the kings who were on good terms with Camelot would ask Wu Ming to help if they could not deal with the demon beasts. Of course, this was under the premise that King Yusef agreed. In fact, after King Yusef's death, many kings sent people to find Wu Ming in private. They wanted to recruit Wu Ming to their country. Of course, there were some before, but it was not obvious. Now, there were all kinds of temptations. If money did not work, they would use treasures. If treasures did not work, they would use weapons. If weapons did not work, they would use titles. If titles did not work, they would use beauties. Some even brought up their own sisters, daughters, and granddaughters. For the kings who gave Wu Ming a good impression, Wu Ming politely rejected them. As for the kings who Wu Ming hated, Wu Ming did not even care about them. Okay, don't think so much. Even if I am a warrior blessed by the legendary dragon, I am still your knight. I promise, I will always be with you, my king. Your Majesty. Wu Ming smiled, and his handsome face made Artoria dazed. When she came back to her senses, Artoria lowered her head and said with a red face, Okay, the documents are done. Let's go home. Early to bed early is good for health. You told me that. Artoria pushed Wu Ming. Realizing the problem, Wu Ming smiled bitterly and thought. Why did I find that I became better looking before? Is this the benefit of the awakening of the origin dragon? By the way, Lia. What's wrong? When you become a king, call yourself the British Red Dragon. Oh, British. Red Dragon. Yes, we are the British Red Dragon and White Dragon. A pair. Let's talk about it later. Okay, don't push me. Leah, why is your face so red? Are you sick? No. Okay, let's go home and sleep. Yes. The moonlight came out from the dark clouds, illuminating the path of the man and woman. Chapter 14. 3 days later, Artoria, who had disguised herself as a man, accepted the coronation ceremony of the Pope. To be honest, Wu Ming was disgusted by the coronation ceremony. After all, as a king, he had to let a believer be crowned. Well, although the West had always been like this, Wu Ming was not interested in gods. It was not that Wu Ming did not believe in the existence of gods. In this world full of mysteries, all kinds of things that people imagined were possible. Gods definitely existed in the world of the M-shaped moon. Even in the ordinary world that Wu Ming lived in, who could guarantee that there were no gods before? After the coronation ceremony, Wu Ming did not leave immediately. After all, as the symbol of Camello, Wu Ming still had to greet the ambassadors sent by the kings. This was the legendary diplomacy. After the ambassadors left, Wu Ming sat in the hall of the palace and let out a long sigh. Wei, are you all right? You look like you're having a hard time, Artoria asked Wu Ming. As a king, she had to greet the ambassadors together with Wu Ming. I'm fine. I'm just not used to being a politician. Wu Ming said lazily. Politician? You have invented a very good word for it, Vi, Artoria said, reading Wu Ming's modern language carefully and admiringly. Ahahaha. Actually, someone taught me this term. Wu Ming said a bit awkwardly. By the way, about the night order I mentioned, have you thought about it? Wu Ming asked. Well, I think it's good. We can do it. Artoria said seriously. No, the recruitment of the night order must be strict. Ability is not the most important thing. Character is the most important. Artoria raised her young face and looked at Wu Ming. Don't worry. I've thought about it. In the end, you will be the final judge. Wu Ming touched Artoria's face and said. Is that so? Why are you touching my face? Artoria asked with a red face. To be honest, every time Wu Ming touched her body, Artoria would blush. Sometimes it was slightly red, and sometimes it was as red as a monkey's butt. Because when I think that the owner of such a young face has to shoulder the burden of the whole country, I feel that God is unfair. Wu Ming's eyes were filled with pity. After saying that, Artoria's face was no longer red. And Artoria were both silent. When I knew that I was going to be a king, I was very scared. Artoria paused and continued, Merlin told me that I was born to be a king. Ever since I could remember, he had been teaching me everything that a king should have. During the day, I kept practicing. At night, Merlin taught me magic in my dreams. Slowly, I got tired of it. Wu Ming's hand stopped touching Artoria's face. Because I was scared. The more I learned, the more I felt that I was not capable enough. I was scared that I could not become the king that Merlin and the people expected, until what? Until I met you. Artoria looked into Wu Ming's eyes. Her emerald eyes were filled with emotions. Ever since I could remember, I knew the story of the Silver Dragon of Britain. As a knight, he was very good. He was noble, powerful, smart, and kind. Everyone in Camelot praised him. Slowly, I started to work hard to become the Silver Dragon of Britain. Wu Ming put down his hand and listened to Artoria carefully. Back then, you met me in the forest where I often practiced. You said that you wanted to take me as your squire. I was so happy that I moved out of my foster father's house and moved to your house. Artoria lowered her head and smiled. A few years later, when I learned about your relationship with Merlin, I realized that the encounter in the forest could have been arranged. But I was still very happy. Because of you, Merlin had to slow down my training. Because of you, I was able to taste the joy of being a young girl. Because of you, I was able to feel your love. Finally, because of you, I got the motivation to become a king. Artoria raised her head and looked at Wuming again. She was about to throw herself into his arms. Artoria's mouth opened slightly. Wuming's pupils shrunk. He was a little surprised. If he was not mistaken, the last sentence, which was so weak that he almost did not hear it clearly, was, Wuming did not move, but his eyes kept darting around. Wuming did not expect that Artoria would have so many thoughts. Wuming thought about it carefully and understood. A young girl was told that she had to bear a heavy burden since she was born. Coincidentally, there was a perfect and handsome idol who was shouldering the burden of a young girl. After a deliberately arranged encounter, the young girl and the idol met and spent more than 10 years together. During these years, the idol took care of the young girl in every possible way. The young girl was very happy and gradually fell in love with the idol. When the young girl officially accepted the burden, the young girl confessed everything to the idol. Wuming now felt that Artoria's current situation was caused by him. A girl's heart is so mysterious. Wuming thought. Artoria looked at Wuming, who did not want to hug her. She lowered her head and her face was a little pale. Artoria stood up and said, "Well, I have something to do." Wuming hugged Artoria, who was already petite, in his arms. Artoria was a little stunned at first, but when she realized what was going on, she hugged Wuming tightly. Artoria's face was pressed against Wuming's chest, which was not wearing armor. She listened to the strong and powerful heartbeat of the king and smiled. "Lia, I'm sorry," Wuming said. Artoria, who was in his arms, was stunned. "I can't promise that I can be with you until the end, but I will try my best to be with you until the end. This is the biggest promise I can give you." Wuming signed a contract with King Yusef. As long as Wuming fulfilled the contract, he would be freed. As a person who did not belong to this era, Wuming would most likely return to his era after he was freed. This was what Merlin told Wuming. Wuming immediately told Artoria his concern. Maybe it was because she trusted Wuming or because she learned from Merlin, Artoria did not change her expression. She just said lightly, "It's enough." The two of them hugged each other and blended together. Chapter 15. The next day, in her office in the palace, Artoria was sitting on a chair with her back against the floor-to-ceiling window. She was going through the documents she had submitted that day seriously. Merlin and Wuming were standing on either side of Artoria, giving her advice. Wuming was actually learning from her. After all, compared to being a politician, Merlin was more suitable than Wuming. After all, he was older. Just kidding. Wuming had also learned a lot about the skills of a politician when he was learning from Skaha. In addition, Wuming had dealt with the nobles and kings of various countries over the years, so he had learned a lot. However, compared to Merlin, who had taught Artoria how to be a king, Wuming had to admit defeat. Time went by little by little. When Artoria finished the last document under Merlin's guidance, Merlin stretched his body and said, "Let's go." Phew. The speed of processing today is obviously faster. It seems that soon, the king will be able to process documents alone. Wuming nodded and said, "Yes, the king is indeed growing fast. She is one step closer to unifying the island of Britain. I have to thank the two of you. After all, without you, I wouldn't be who I am today," Artoria said calmly. Since last night, Wuming and Artoria had agreed that one would live as the king, and the other would continue to live as the king's knight. This led to the separation of superior and subordinate in the palace office. "By the way, it's getting late. It's time for dinner." Artoria clenched her right fist and punched the palm of her left hand. Hearing this, Wuming and Merlin were speechless. Wuming looked at Merlin and said with his eyes, "Why didn't I realize that the king has such a big appetite before?" Merlin also looked at Wuming. Maybe it's because I pulled out the sword in the stone, maybe." Artoria had already walked to the door. She turned around and asked. What's wrong? Villo, Merlin, it's time to eat. Let's go, or we won't have enough time. You've eaten so much, it'd be strange if you had enough time. Wuming and Merlin shouted in their hearts. Okay, okay. Coming, coming. The dividing line of rice. After the meal, Merlin said, I'm going to guide my new student. Then, he left the palace. According to Wuming's understanding, Merlin's new student was the daughter of a noble. Other than his face that made him want a Wuming from time to time, Merlin's only flaw was that he liked to hook up with little girls. Is that so? I believe that if it's you, you should be able to guide that student well. This was the king who did not know the truth. Okay. Okay, my king. Let's not talk about Merlin for now. What do you think about the new night order that I mentioned earlier? Wuming laughed to divert the king's attention. I think it's a good name. Right. Right, how about we call it the Knights of the Round Table? Artoria blushed and said. My king, did you think of this name after seeing the round table that we ate at just now? The more Wuming thought about it, the more likely it seemed. The famous Knights of the Round Table had a name just because of a meal. How could that be? Right, I just remembered the round stone table that my foster father gave me a few days ago. My foster father meant that I could use that big table for meetings in the future. I thought that since we're using a round table, why don't we call it the Knights of the Round Table? Artoria looked like she was taking responsibility and did not want to eat anymore. Okay, my king. I'll trust you this time. But that table is okay when there are not many people. It's a bit small when there are too many people. Well, we can build a big round table in the future. We'll use this one first. Artoria blushed. Yes, Lia is the best. Wuming patted Artoria's head again. Sob. Didn't you say that we have to maintain the relationship between a king and a knight? Why are you like this? Artoria cried. Didn't you say that we don't have to maintain the relationship between a king and a knight when there's no one around? Sure enough, it's more comfortable this way. I'm not used to being a loyal knight. Wuming stretched and said. You're just Lia's lover. I'm the king now, not Lia. Please respect me. Artoria's face was full of shame and anger. Oh. Is that so, my king? Wuming smirked. Wait. What are you doing? Wait. Ugh, seeing Wuming's face getting closer and closer, Artoria panicked. Finally, the two faces met. Artoria's eyes widened. She couldn't believe that her first kiss was gone just like that. Wuming only kissed her lightly and left immediately. What do you think, my king? I respect you very much. Wuming continued to smirk. In the end, Wuming was still moved by the young girl in front of him who he had watched grow up. Although it was somewhat difficult to say it out loud, as he was almost 30 years old, it didn't matter. Anyway, as the rude dragon of the long-lived species, Wuming wasn't even a baby at 30 years old. Besides, Wuming wasn't the kind of person who procrastinated. If he liked someone, he would want to be together. Of course, Maeve's situation was special. Wuming only treated Maeve as a little sister who lacked love. Alright, let's get down to business. Looking at Artoria's blushing face, Wuming felt that he should give Lia some dignity as the king. After saying that, he went straight to his office. As expected, the king is still a little girl now. She's still a long way from King Arthur, who was good at war. Wuming thought to himself. Artoria, who was still blushing, calmed down and followed him to his office. What I mean is, the knights can come from different countries and even have different faiths. The meaning of the round table is equality and the world. All the knights of the round table are equal and partners. There is no difference between the round table and the round table. Everything is for the king and for Britain. Wu Ming told her the definition of the round table that he knew before. After all, it was better not to change history. Besides, the definition of the Knights of the Round Table was really good. However, when Wu Ming thought that he did not change history, history had changed a long time ago. Knights of the Round Table, huh? As expected of the Silver Dragon of Britain. You think differently. I was just thinking. Ahem. Artoria seemed to have realized that she almost said something wrong. She coughed. What are you thinking? Wu Ming smirked again. Ahem. Just like what you think. Artoria glared at Wu Ming. That's what you think for now. If there are any changes, we'll talk about it later, Artoria said seriously. Yes, my king. Wu Ming's expression also became serious. After all, even if they were lovers, there was still a hierarchy when it came to important matters. Besides, Wu Ming respected Artoria's position as the king. After that, the two began to talk about other things about Camelot. The king was also growing up slowly. Chapter 16. The banquet lasted until nightfall. After everyone left, Wu Ming asked the maids to leave and helped the drunk Artoria to her room. You said you can't drink anymore. You must be drunk. Wu Ming sighed. Artoria saw that it was Wu Ming who was helping her, so she leaned her body against him. In the end, it was Wu Ming who was holding Artoria in his arms and moving forward little by little. Ugh. I didn't drink that much. I'm so tired. Vi. My head hurts. Artoria rubbed her head against Wu Ming's chest. Was it because Wu Ming didn't wear his silver armor today? Wu Ming shook his head. Wu Ming waved his hand, and a few lune runes appeared. Wu Ming put his hand on Artoria's forehead. Do you feel better, Lia? Wu Ming used the lune rune to purify her. Much better. Artoria opened her drunken eyes. At this moment, there was only sobriety in her eyes. By the way, Vi, did you secretly use the lune rune on yourself? How come you're fine after drinking so much? Artoria looked at Wu Ming angrily. Wu Ming laughed and patted Artoria's head. Now that's an adult, little Ya. I'm the king. Don't hit my head. Yes. As they were talking, Wu Ming and Artoria arrived at Artoria's room. Let's go in, Lia. I've talked to Wire. You just need to talk to her. Why are you calling her Wire? You sound so close. Seeing that Artoria was angry again, Wu Ming patted his face and laughed. She promised to keep it a secret for you. All right, don't be jealous. Let's go in. I'll stay here tonight. What's wrong, Vi? Is something going to happen? Artoria asked seriously. Nothing. I'm just worried that some maids or knights might come by and eavesdrop on us. Of course, it was a lie. What really worried Wu Ming was Morgan Le Fay. He was worried that the woman would do something on Artoria's wedding night. Just in case, Wu Ming decided to stay at the door. All right, but if anything happens, you have to call me, Artoria said. Artoria said worriedly. How could she not see that Morgan Le Fay was acting strangely today? Although her sister Wang had always been strange. All right, I know. Let's go in. Tomorrow is the first meeting of the Knights of the Round Table. Wu Ming pushed Artoria into the room. After closing the door, Wu Ming quickly moved his hands in the air. Lines of lune runes appeared in the air. Then, a large number of lune runes were attached to the walls of Artoria's room. The whole room was sealed, including the windows. Phew. Wu Ming took a deep breath and took out the armor from the lune rune. He put it on with magic. However, he did not wear a helmet. Now, the lune rune on Wu Ming's body had been turned into a golden tattoo that looked like a dragon's head. It was tattooed on Wu Ming's right arm. This noble phantasm was a support noble phantasm that did not have any actual attack power. The name of the noble phantasm was Dragonist. The documents that Wu Ming submitted to Artoria were also kept in Dragonist. Now, everything that Wu Ming had was stored in Dragonist. It was safe and convenient. Noble Phantasm was one of Wu Ming's greatest weapons. A safe and convenient independent space like this was not something that anyone could have. Wu Ming fastened X Silver, Meteor Silver, to his waist and activated Yggdrasil, to turn it into a silver arm and put it on his left arm. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and waited for Morgan Le Fay to arrive. The moon slowly rose. When the moon was in the middle, the lights in the corridor were extinguished by the wind outside the window. After a while, Wu Ming opened his eyes. Logically speaking, there should be knights patrolling the palace at night. However, it was completely dark and there was no one around. Obviously, something was wrong. Wu Ming used his mana to sense the surroundings and Artoria's room. He could not sense anyone in the room or around him. Wu Ming also sensed the strange atmosphere around him. Illusion. Wu Ming was shocked. How could I be affected by an illusion? This is not the era of the gods. There shouldn't be any illusions that work on me. Wu Ming closed his eyes and used his own mana to stimulate the power of the will in his mind. Ugh! Wu Ming groaned and opened his eyes. The scene in front of him changed back to the previous corridor. The lights were not blown out and were still burning. However, there was an additional figure in front of Wu Ming. Your Highness Morgan Le Fay, what brings you here so late at night? Wu Ming wiped the golden blood from the corner of his mouth. He also used his mana to check Artoria and Guinevere's room. Oh, I see that Mr. Villo is still guarding the king and queen's room. I was worried that you might be lonely, so I came to see you. Morgan Le Fay smiled. I'm fine. If you don't have anything else to say, you should go to bed early. Wu Ming said calmly. All right, Mr. Villo. I'll take my leave now. Good night. Morgan turned around and left. Wu Ming watched Morgan Le Fay's figure disappear around the corner of the corridor. Wu Ming did not expect Morgan to leave. Of course, Wu Ming did not believe that she was here to visit him. That woman would not do something so boring. After checking Artoria and Guinevere's condition, Wu Ming pulled himself together and started his night watch again. It seems that I have to find a way to train and use my mental power in the future. Wu Ming was sure that Morgan used a kamikaze illusion on him. It was not that Wu Ming did not believe Morgan, but Wu Ming knew her too well. The person who knows you best is your opponent. This sentence was not without reason. Wu Ming guessed that Morgan might have used a kamikaze magic tool. Not to mention that kamikaze magic was lost. Even if it was, Morgan Le Fay could not. No, with her talent, it's not impossible for her to learn one or two kamikaze magic. Wu Ming rubbed his chin and thought. I just don't know what he did tonight. I just don't know if Mordred will be born. Morgan did not succeed in meeting King Arthur. Wu Ming was sure of this because even if she used spatial magic, the Lune rune would react. Wu Ming used the 18 primordial lune. Wu Ming did not believe that Morgan could avoid the primordial lune's magic. Forget it. I'll deal with whatever comes my way. I'll just take it one step at a time. Slowly, the sun rose. Chapter 17. Not long after the sun rose, Artoria pushed open the door to her room. Queen Guinevere came out with her. Villo, did anything happen last night? Although it was a question, Artoria asked with certainty. Obviously, Artoria trusted Wu Ming. She believed that even if something happened, he would be able to handle it. I'm fine. It was a peaceful night. Wu Ming shook his head. Although he did not sleep last night, Wu Ming was fine. Well, since it's daytime, why don't you take a nap, Lord Villo? Guinevere asked from behind Artoria. That's right, Villo. You should take a nap to avoid any mistakes at work. Artoria was also concerned. It's fine. When I was traveling, I didn't sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. One night is nothing. Wuming shook his head. To be honest, Wuming once found a giant egg by accident. After eating it, he was chased by a monster for 3 days and 3 nights. The egg was the monster's child. In the end, Wuming had to jump off a cliff and stay in the water for half a day before he was able to escape the monster's pursuit. Now that I think about it, it was really dangerous. Wuming mumbled. What? Artoria was confused. Nothing. Alright, let's go eat. The chef should have made breakfast. After breakfast, we still have the first nights of the round table meeting. Wuming quickly covered it up. You're right. Let's go, Guinevere, Artoria said to Guinevere, who was behind her. Yes, my king. Guinevere smiled. The moment he smiled, Wuming and Artoria were stunned for a second. Then, they realized what was going on. Guinevere, you're so beautiful. Artoria's face blushed as she complimented. This made Wuming stunned. Could it be that Artoria wanted to turn the act into reality and become a lesbian? However, what Artoria said next made Wuming lose his composure. No wonder the Villo was so infatuated. This time, Guinevere didn't say anything. He just looked at Wuming with a slightly red face. Cough, let's go and eat. It won't taste good if it gets cold, Wuming said immediately. Oh, let's eat. Don't let the food get cold. Artoria's eyes lit up. She wanted to go to the dining room immediately. Wuming smiled helplessly and dragged Guinevere to follow her. After dinner, Artoria went to prepare for the meeting. She asked Wuming to escort Guinevere to the library of the palace. It was Guinevere's request. According to Guinevere, she had loved to read since she was young. She had basically read all the books in Liao Dequan's territory. After arranging 2 maids for Guinevere, Wuming went to the round table conference room. Ever since King Liao Dequan brought the giant round table here, Artoria immediately asked Merlin to use magic to move the table to a large empty room. She named the room the Round Table Conference Room. Wuming pushed open the door and found many people sitting around the table. Wuming glanced around and found that almost all the current knights of the Round Table were here. Wuming walked to Artoria's side. As the first knight, Wuming naturally sat next to the king. Lancelot sat on the other side. After Wuming took his seat, Artoria glanced at everyone in the room and began to speak. In general, she wanted to save the people, save Britain, unify Britain, and drive the invading Saxons out of Britain. In fact, this was a mobilization meeting. Soon, it was noon. Well, that's all I have to say. Let's go and have dinner. Artoria stood up as she spoke. Yes, Your Majesty. Everyone shouted in unison. Wuming was sitting on a big rock in the yard of his house with his eyes closed. Ever since Wuming fell into Morgan Le Fay's illusion, Wuming began to cultivate his mental strength. The best way was to ask Merlin for advice. As a half-nightmare, Merlin had unimaginable mental strength and magic power. Naturally, he also had a way to cultivate mental strength. In response to Wuming's friend request, Merlin immediately told Wuming how to cultivate mental strength. He also taught Wuming for dozens of days. Now, Wuming was cultivating his mental strength. A strange wave was emitted from Wuming's body. It gave people the feeling that as long as they stood in front of Wuming, they would be completely seen through. Wuming continuously extended this force until it was 5 meters away. Then, this force began to shrink until it was completely close to Wuming. Then, Wuming slowly floated up. This was Wuming's way of using his mental strength, telekinesis. This was a method that Wuming accidentally discovered. It could be used to move things. Because Wuming's mental strength was more solid than Merlin's, Merlin suggested that he try to develop telekinesis. It could also strengthen his mental strength and increase his resistance to illusions. Because his mental strength was unusually solid, Wuming's telekinesis was more suitable than other people's. Bam bam, a knock came from the door. Wu-Ming slowly landed on the rock and opened his eyes. "Come in." The one who walked in was a knight with a resolute expression. "Oh, it's Guy. Is my king looking for me?" Wu-Ming asked when he saw the person. "Yes, Sir Villo. My king is looking for you. It's about the war." Ever since Guy joined the Knights of the Round Table, he was dragged to the palace by Wu-Ming to be the palace's butler. According to Wu-Ming's understanding, Guy was an excellent knight in all aspects except for his inability to control his mouth. "Got it. I'll be right there." Wu-Ming jumped off the rock and walked to the door. Guy wanted to move to the side to let Wu-Ming walk in front. Wu-Ming patted Guy's shoulder and said, "I told you to just call me Villo in the future. Don't call me sir. Why are you, Gawain, Aguin, and the others so stubborn?" Wu-Ming said earnestly. "Please forgive me, Sir Villo. I will change in the future." Gawain and the others have said that dozens of times. "Forget it. You can call me whatever you like." Wu-Ming shook his head and said helplessly. Guy also smiled faintly. After that, Wu-Ming and Guy went to Artoria's office. To be honest, because of magic, the current Britain was very similar to 1,000 years in the future in many aspects. For example, this office had floor-to-ceiling windows, colored silk, mahogany desk, mahogany bookshelf, and marble floor. Wu-Ming switched to straw paper when he came to Britain not long ago, replacing the parchment paper. While Wu-Ming was sighing, Artoria spoke. "Wu-Ming, I'm going to conquer the Saxons in the north of Britain immediately." Artoria's expression was not very good. "Did something happen?" Wu-Ming asked. "Take a look at this." Wu-Ming took the straw paper from Artoria. The more Wu-Ming read, the worse his expression became. Although it was not as bad as Artoria's, it was still very serious. "It's up to you, my king." Wu-Ming read the paper and handed it to Guy, who was standing on the side. Wu-Ming's words meant that he agreed. "Guy, pass down the order. Gather the whole army. The target is Fort Decrez in the north of Britain." Guy, who had finished reading the paper, received the order with a gloomy expression. "Yes, my king." Chapter 18. 3 days later, Artoria, in her armor, stood in front of the assembled army. "Everyone, the Saxons have disturbed our homeland and committed many heinous crimes. Now, we are going to drive them out of our homeland and protect the people of Britain. Drive out the Saxons. Protect Britain." Wu-Ming raised his sword Silver and shouted. "Drive out the Saxons. Protect Britain." Everyone raised their weapons and shouted. "Pass my order, march." Under Artoria's command, the army began to march towards the Decrez fortress in the north of Britain. Because the Decrez fortress was not far away, Artoria only took half a day to reach the nearest town to the Decrez fortress, the city of Lai Ku. The lord of this town was called King Lai Ku. Ever since the Anglo-Saxons had taken possession of the fort of Decrez, King Lai had been troubled every day. If the Saxons continued to invade, King Lai Ku's territory would be the first to bear the brunt. As the lord, Lai Ku would definitely be killed by the Saxons. After all, this was what the Saxons did when they invaded Britain. If it wasn't for the fact that the Decrez fortress was the only way to connect the north and the south of Britain, Artoria would not have brought her army here so quickly. Of course, the Saxons' actions also irritated Artoria. After Artoria settled the soldiers and knights, King Lai Ku invited Artoria to the city lord's mansion. Artoria sat on the city lord's seat with Wu-Ming and Lancelot behind her. King Lai Ku, who was standing in front of Artoria, smiled apologetically. "Ah. King Arthur is young and promising. Behind you must be Lord Villo, known as the Silver Dragon of Britain, and Lord Lancelot, the Knight of the Lake. Both of you are very talented. All right, King Lai Ku, hurry up and tell me the specific information about the enemy." Artoria frowned and said unhappily. King Lai Ku also knew that he had angered the king in front of him. Considering that he still needed the king's help to deal with the Saxons, he began to explain the information about the enemy. After all, the information Artoria received was not complete. She still needed information from the local tyrant to supplement. Before Lyko could finish his story, Artoria suddenly yelled at him. "Get to the point." Artoria's shout scared King Lyko. After all, Artoria had the blood of the red dragon, so her aura was a lot stronger than the others. Wu Ming shook his head in his heart. Lyko Wang's words were really nonsense. He was actually telling the information from the beginning like he was telling a story. Moments later, Artoria left the mansion with Wu Ming and Lancelot, leaving behind Lyko Wang, who was in shock. After returning to the camp, Artoria summoned the knights and began the first pre-war meeting. Of the enemy. Calm Artoria Ku of the Dekres fortress. With Wu Ming's strategy, Artoria decided that she would personally lead the team to face the enemy head-on. He secretly sent Wu Ming to form an assassination team to infiltrate Dekres fortress. Artoria did not care about assassination. She thought that it was not in line with the way of the knights. But under Wu Ming's persuasion, Artoria agreed. After all, the Dekres fortress was built on the side of a mountain. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. Even if the Saxons could not defeat Artoria, they could still defend the gate. After all, the Saxons were a group of warriors, not knights. At night, Wu Ming led 5 soldiers personally selected by him. They were all experienced assassins. With the help of Wu Ming's Lune Rune, they entered the Dekres fortress through the cliff next to it. Although the Dekres fortress was called a fortress, it was actually a town. It was just that the walls of the town were very strong. When Wu Ming and the others saw the miserable state of the Dekres fortress, the 5 soldiers immediately lost their composure. On the wide streets, not a single resident could be seen. The barbaric figures of the Saxons were everywhere, and large amounts of blood could be seen on the ground. There were even cases where the Saxons would drag people out of their homes and assault them, all because the Saxons were in a bad mood. Wu Ming quickly led the 5 soldiers into an uninhabited house. As for the original inhabitants, Wu Ming guessed that they had been killed by the Saxons. The 5 soldiers almost exposed themselves when they were agitated. In fact, Wu Ming only chose 5 soldiers because their families were in the Dekres fortress. They had rushed over when King Arthur announced the formation of the Knights of the Dekres. Because they were not strong enough, they were assigned to the barracks. That night, Wu Ming ordered the 5 soldiers to scout out the Saxons. On the other hand, he wanted them to go to their homes and see if their families were still there. The next day, only 4 soldiers returned. Their expressions were not good, and Wu Ming even saw tears in the corners of one soldier's eyes. As for the one who did not return, Wu Ming did not believe that the Saxons would be able to discover the assassin. According to the 4 who returned, the one who did not return witnessed the scene of his parents being killed by the Saxons. In order to prevent his sister from being humiliated, he rushed out and killed her with his own hands. He also killed the surrounding Saxons. Because he had been exposed, the soldier personally charged into the Saxons that had gathered and died without a complete corpse. Wu Ming sighed and did not say anything. Wu Ming combined the information gathered by the 5 soldiers on the Saxons' distribution. After careful calculations, he set up assassination targets and escape routes. That night, the Saxons lost a few squad leaders. 3 days quickly passed. During the day, Wu Ming's group of 5 continued to gather information on high-ranking officials. At night, Wu Ming's group continued to assassinate. Artoria led troops to attack the Saxons, but the Saxons naturally closed their gates. This was because on the first day, they had been beaten by the Knights of the Round Table and the Camelot soldiers. On the 5th day, after the Saxons lost almost all of their generals, the remaining squad leader immediately ordered them to retreat from Fort de Clay's. After retreating, the Saxons left behind a few remaining soldiers and began to massacre the residents of Fort de Clay's, burning down the houses. Wu Ming's 4 soldiers could not take it anymore and charged into the enemy ranks. Wu Ming also furiously joined the battle. In the end, the remaining Saxons were all killed, and Wu Ming was the only one left. Wu Ming laid out the 4 corpses and opened the gates of Fort de Clay's. Wu Ming did not find the body of the 5th soldier. At this point, King Arthur used only 5 days to take back Fort de Clay's, which was known to be easy to defend and difficult to attack in Britain. This battle was known as the Battle of Fort de Clay's, and it established the beginning of King Arthur's unification of Britain. At the same time, King Arthur stripped King Lai Ku of his power, and Lai Ku was sent to the guillotine amidst the cheers of the people of Lai Ku. Chapter 19. It had been 10 years since Declete's Blitzkrieg. After 12 major wars, King Arthur had driven the Saxons out of Britain. At the same time, the sword in the stone, Caliba, the invincible golden sword, had broken the code of chivalry in order to save the life of a knight. Because of that, the knight felt extremely guilty and volunteered to search for the Holy Grail that could grant wishes to restore the broken sword in the stone when the war was over. Accompanied by Soundless, Merlin, and Lancelot, Artoria received the star-sacred sword Excalibur and the sacred sword scabbard Avalon from the lake sprite. Moreover, Artoria was blessed by the lake sprite and could walk freely on water. This solved the problem of Artoria's inability to swim. After all, Artoria couldn't appear as a woman. She would be exposed if she tried to swim. What surprised Wu Ming was that the lake sprite had also given him a jade pendant, which could be of help to Wu Ming. Wu Ming later realized that wearing this jade pendant could reduce the negative effects of his dragon attribute, so he had been wearing it ever since. During this time, the number of Knights of the Round Table had increased to 150, which was just enough to fill the Round Table. At the same time, Wu Ming also met the traitorous knight, Mordred. He was wearing a white armor with red stripes, and he had a hoarse voice. Wu Ming always felt a strange connection with the traitorous knight whenever he was close to him. It seemed that Mordred could feel it as well. Because of this, Mordred often spoke ill of Wu Ming. Regarding this connection, Wu Ming vaguely guessed something in his heart. At this time, Artoria was not in Camelot. The Silver Dragon, or Wu Ming, was in charge of guarding Camelot. In the early days of King Arthur's conquest, some nobles and kings ambushed Camelot when Artoria was leading her army to battle. Fortunately, Camelot's soldiers managed to hold them off for a while, allowing Silent Wonder to use Excalibur to protect Camelot as soon as he returned to Camelot. By the way, Excalibur's noble phantasm was a pillar of light that shot up to the sky. It was similar to Gawain's Excalibur and Artoria's Excalibur. Since then, Wu Ming had been stationed in Camelot by Artoria to protect Queen Guinevere and the city of Camelot. As for the nobles and kings who attacked Camelot, Artoria was determined to eliminate them one by one. She told Wu Ming that, even if we keep them alive, they will be a disaster. For the future of Britain, we should get rid of them. In the backyard of the palace, Guinevere, who was in her 20s, had become even more beautiful. She was taking care of her flowers while Wu Ming stood beside her. Master Villo, do you think these flowers are beautiful? Guinevere did not turn around, but Wu Ming could still feel her smile. They are very beautiful. Then, why don't you pick the flowers you like? Guinevere was a little sad. I like them. But as a knight, I should not think about that. Is that so? As long as you like them. Guinevere turned around and smiled. This country is at peace, Guinevere said cheerfully. If I'm not mistaken, yes. Wu Ming was a little worried. Don't worry, Lord Varon. With the invincible silver dragon of Britain and the incomparably valiant King Arthur, there will be peace. I hope so, Wu Ming mumbled. The more peaceful it was, the more uneasy Wu Ming was. In fact, Wu Ming had not seen Merlin for a long time. He could not contact Merlin either. Wu Ming guessed that Merlin might have been sealed away by Morgan Le Fay in Avalon, a fantasy land far away from the mortal world. Wu Ming had warned Merlin, but it seemed like it was useless. Artoria left Camelot to find Merlin. Morgan Le Fay. I hope you can behave, or I will take you away before I leave. During the banquet, everyone was celebrating the unification of Britain and the arrival of peace. Wu Ming, on the other hand, was thinking about what Artoria said to Wu Ming today. Vi. You should leave now, Artoria said. Yes, Britain is at peace. The spell on my body reacted a little. When Wu-Ming was summoned and signed a contract with King Yusef, a layer of magic spell was added to Wu-Ming's body. As long as King Yusef's goal was achieved, the spell would activate and send Wu-Ming back to his original place. However, Wu-Ming was attached to this place. Wu-Ming looked at Artoria, who had not changed at all in 10 years. Wu-Ming could not help but sigh. It seems that I have completely gotten used to the identity of a Villo, Lia. Then what is your real name? Wu-Ming. Then I will call you Ming from now on. Also, this thing, please keep it. Wu-Ming was shocked when he saw the thing Artoria was holding. Wait, Lia, isn't this Avalon? Why are you giving it to me? Seeing Wu-Ming's slightly anxious eyes, Artoria smiled. Because it is at peace. I need you to keep it for me temporarily. Because you said that Avalon will be lost. But, what if I take it with me when I leave? No one knows how long the spell on my body can last. Then, during this time, you will stay close to me and protect me. She finished recalling. Sigh. Wu-Ming sighed. Sure enough, I am still not good at mental activities. Then he shook his head and drank his wine. After the banquet, Wu-Ming was walking to his room in the palace when a maid walked over. Sir Villo, the king invites you to meet in the back garden to discuss something. Wu-Ming frowned, but said after thinking for a moment. Got it. You can leave now. After saying that, Wu-Ming walked away on his own. But the moment Wu-Ming left, he did not notice that the maid's eyes emitted a faint purple light, like an illusory smoke, mysterious. Wu-Ming, on the other hand, was walking into a trap that was designed for him. Chapter 20. Wu-Ming followed the maid's instructions and arrived at the designated location in the backyard of the palace. Then, Wu-Ming saw Artoria sitting on a chair. Wu-Ming walked up and asked. Lia, is there something you need from me? Of course, there is. Suddenly, Artoria turned around and crashed into Wu-Ming's arms. Wu-Ming immediately raised his eyebrows and jumped back. Who are you? Yes, the other party was not Artoria. When the other party spoke, Wu-Ming sensed something strange. When the other party jumped into Wu-Ming's arms, Wu-Ming was already prepared to retreat. But Wu-Ming was still a step too late. Wu-Ming could clearly feel a faint dark aura wrapping around him. Wu-Ming looked at Artoria in front of him, whose face he couldn't see clearly, and his expression froze. He. Lord Villo, it seems that you still haven't recognized me. The other party smiled with a little pride. Could it be? You are Morgan Le Fay. Wu-Ming said in a surprised tone. The other party's temperament, figure, hair color, and voice were all very similar to Artoria's. That was the effect of high-level magic, but Wu-Ming could still see that the other party's original body was related to Artoria. Apart from Morgan Le Fay, Wu-Ming couldn't think of anyone else. He. Lord Villo, long time no see. The other party's body was surrounded by magic, and the other party's figure changed. From the magic fog, an adult version of Artoria walked out. It really is you, Morgan Le Fay. Wu-Ming didn't expect Morgan Le Fay's real appearance to be so similar to Artoria's. If Artoria's hair reached her waist and her breasts developed again, she would be exactly the same as Morgan Le Fay. Ah. Lord Villo, don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being such an eyesore. Morgan Le Fay smiled charmingly, and a sheepskin scroll appeared in her hand. This is my summoning scroll. No, that's just a replica. Yes, the scroll in Morgan's hand was very similar to the scroll that Merlin and King Yusei once used to summon Wu-Ming. The reason why it was called a replica was that Wu-Ming did not feel his blood on the scroll, and the real scroll was in Wu-Ming's hands. A stream of light surged on Wu-Ming's arm, and an ancient-looking sheepskin scroll appeared in his hand. Are you trying to send me away, Morgan Le Fay? Ha, as expected of Lord Wu-Ming. Also, the darkness aura on your body has already wrapped around you. This thing is something that I obtained with great difficulty. Even if it's you, you won't be able to get rid of it in a short time, Morgan Le Fay said with a complacent smile. Suddenly, a sword light slashed towards Morgan Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay hastily dodged, but the sword light cut off a few strands of her hair, causing them to flutter to the ground. No matter what tricks you are playing, as long as I can get rid of you before then, all your tricks will be useless. Wu Ming's eyes turned red as he wielded the sacred sword of Meteor, Silver, once again slashing at Morgan Le Fay. This won't do, Lord Villo. You should obediently leave. Morgan Le Fay's finger moved, and a technique was instantly shot out. At the same time, the black aura within Wu Ming's body suddenly erupted, imprisoning Wu Ming. Ugh! Wu Ming maintained his sword-slashing posture, and suddenly became motionless. In the next moment, a mouthful of golden blood spurted out from his mouth. PFFF. Morgan Le Fay promptly made a decision and prepared a scroll that had already been opened, staining it with Wu Ming's blood. The imprisonment on Wu Ming's body was removed, but the black aura still did not disappear. Wu Ming knelt on one knee, leaning on his sword as he looked at Morgan Le Fay with resentment. Hateful, Morgan Le Fay, just you wait. Hee Lord Villo, then I'll be waiting. Morgan Le Fay instantly activated the reverse summoning of the scroll, and threw it at Wu Ming. When the scroll was half a meter away from Wu Ming, it suddenly activated, and a magic formation appeared on the surface of the scroll. A suction force appeared from the magic formation, as if it wanted to suck Wu Ming in. In fact, after the scroll sucked Wu Ming in, it would open a space-time channel, sending him back to his original era. Don't even think about having your way. Wu Ming began to resist, but the black aura within his body played its role, unceasingly eroding Wu Ming's 4 limbs, 5 viscera, and 6 bowels. Wu Ming's whole body was bleeding, and blood was gushing out from his armor. Roar. Wu Ming's eyes had already turned into scarlet dragon pupils, and his shouts had already turned into dragon roars. Wu Ming's armor began to disintegrate. Pieces of armor fell to the ground, making muffled sounds. Wu Ming's body began to change. Dragon scales slowly grew out of his palms, a pair of dragon wings spread out from his back, and a pair of cuticles appeared on the top of his head. At first glance, Wu Ming had become a monster. Roar! A muffled and painful dragon roar echoed throughout the palace. Many people, including Artoria and Guinevere, heard the roar and rushed to the backyard of the palace. Vi, is that you? Artoria quickly put on her clothes and ran toward the dragon roar. Guinevere sped up as well, running at a slower speed than Artoria. Lord Villo, please be safe. Because Wu Ming was struggling to resist the influence of the spacetime suction, and because of the black gas that Morgan Le Fay had obtained from somewhere, Wu Ming, this young dragon of origin, could no longer maintain his original form and began to gradually turn into a dragon. At the same time, his rationality was gradually disappearing. This was also the reason why Wu Ming had never transformed into a dragon. Wu Ming knew that with his current abilities, he wouldn't be able to resist the enormous power of the origin dragon, after transforming into a dragon, and would lose his mind. He didn't expect that he would be tricked by Morgan Le Fay today. Roar! Morgan Le Fay! Le Fay! Roar! Wu Ming rushed toward Morgan Le Fay with a spear in his left hand and a sword in his right hand. However, Morgan Le Fay did not move at all, as if victory was already in his hands. Bang! A large sword that shone like a lake under the moonlight blocked Wu Ming's path. Lance! Lot! Let go! Wu Ming said in a hoarse and intermittent voice. You are Lord Villo. Lancelot did not expect that the monster-like person in front of him was the British silver dragon Villo that he respected the most. Let go. No. Please calm down. Lord Villo, do you know what you are doing? She is the king's sister. Lancelot shouted. I want to eradicate the hidden danger for Arthur. Wu Ming rushed forward with his spear and sword. Because it was Wuming, Lancelot could only keep defending. Your Highness Morgan, please leave this place quickly and find the king. Knight Lancelot, Lord Villo was cursed by a black-robed person in order to save me. He is now unconscious, please stop him. Morgan Le Fay cried. I know, please leave quickly, or I will not be able to stop Lord Villo. Lancelot didn't ask why Wuming and Morgan Le Fay were here. It wasn't that he didn't want to ask, but that he couldn't in this situation. Morgan Le Fay nodded and left. When Wuming saw that Morgan Le Fay was about to leave, he instantly exploded. Ah! After a series of dazzling attacks, the Knight of the Lake's armor was covered in wounds. Sir Villo, please calm down. Lancelot resisted with all his might. Peng dash. Lancelot didn't pay attention and was sent flying by Wuming. Soon after, Wuming instantly arrived behind Morgan Le Fay, who was about to leave, and slashed out with his sword. Way! Just then, Artoria and Guinevere arrived. Just as Silver was about to hit Wuming, the suction force of the scroll reached its maximum, and Wuming was sucked into the dimensional passage. M.O. Root. Roar. Finally, the dimensional passage closed, and the scroll fell to the ground. After that, according to the legends of King Arthur, after King Arthur unified Britain and drove out the Saxons, King Arthur's strongest knight, the British Silver Dragon, sacrificed himself to save King Arthur's sister, the court healer Morgan Le Fay, from a black magician's curse. He was eroded by black magic and turned into an evil dragon, which was then sealed by King Arthur himself. After that, King Arthur was so heartbroken that he repaired the broken armor of the British Silver Dragon every day. He sent out a large number of Knights of the Round Table to search for the Holy Grail and rescue the British Silver Dragon. During this time, King Arthur's queen, Guinevere, was discovered to have betrayed the king and fallen in love with someone else. A large number of King Arthur's knights unanimously petitioned to have Guinevere burned at the stake. Lancelot, who was known as the Knight of the Lake, saved the queen out of love. While saving her, he accidentally killed the Knights of the Round Table, Gareth, and Gaholes, causing the Knight of the Sun, Gawain, to hate him. After Guinevere became a nun and Lancelot fled to France, Gawain requested to pursue Lancelot. Out of morality, King Arthur led an expedition to France. King Arthur left behind Knight Mordred, who was trusted by King Arthur. After King Arthur refused to acknowledge him as his descendant, Mordred already had thoughts of rebellion. During King Arthur's expedition, he spread the rumor that the king was dead. He united many knights who were disappointed in the king and proclaimed himself king. After King Arthur heard this, he immediately returned and fought Mordred to the death in Camlan's Hill. In the end, King Arthur released the Holy Lance and killed the traitorous knight Mordred. However, King Arthur was also heavily injured by the traitorous knight Mordred and did not have long to live. During this time, Lancelot asked about it and came to rescue, but was stopped by the Knight of the Sun, Gawain. Gawain was hit by the enemy on Camlan's Hill and suffered an old injury during the battle with Lancelot. In the end, Gawain died on Camlan's Hill. In the end, the only knight left, Bethel, threw the Excalibur, which was King Arthur's sword, into the lake 3 times according to the king's order. In the end, Bethel and Lancelot died alone, Guinevere became a nun for the rest of her life, and King Arthur was sent to a fantasy land by the Lady of the Lake to wait for a future crisis in Britain. Arthur's dynasty was destroyed. Chapter 21. After Wuming was transported into the space-time tunnel, the changes in his body became more and more obvious. His rationality also disappeared bit by bit. In the end, he began to attack the space-time tunnel without restraint. Coincidentally, Wuming in his origin dragon form could destroy space-time. As a result, the space-time tunnel, which wasn't very sturdy to begin with, was completely destroyed by Wuming. It was also due to the influence of the space-time tunnel that apart from the items in Dragonist, Wuming's Holy Spear Yggdrasil and Holy Sword Silver were also affected by the space-time tunnel and vaguely entered the area where the space-time tunnel was broken. Wuming instinctively made a prompt decision and swallowed the Holy Sword Silver, Meteor Silver, which was connected to Wu Ming by blood. When the holy spear Yggdrasil, left the space-time tunnel, it also entered an unknown era together with Wu Ming. Then, there was a legend of a holy dragon that lived on top of a mountain in that era. On a mountain peak that was closest to the blue sky, in a man-made cave, a terrifying and holy dragon was hibernating. The strange thing was that this dragon's body was surrounded by wisps of black gas. The dragon's white scales were angular and filled with a silver-white metallic luster. The dragon horns on its head resembled a dazzling crown that shone brightly. Scorching dragon breath spewed out along with the dragon's breath. After an unknown period of time, the black gas disappeared and the dragon's breathing gradually stabilized. The dragon opened its eyes, and its ruby-like eyes were particularly eye-catching in the dark cave. "I see. Have I become a dragon?" An ancient and deep voice sounded from the dragon's mouth. Yes, this dragon in the cave was the origin dragon Wu Ming that Morgan Le Fay tricked. Ever since arriving in this unfamiliar era, Wu Ming had completely lost his rationality due to the enormous power of the origin dragon, leaving only the nature of the origin dragon. During this period, the black gas in Wu Ming's body constantly eroded him. Wu Ming instinctively resisted this power and eliminated it. As a result, apart from the occasional predation, Wu Ming basically stayed in the cave that he opened up with his power to hibernate. Coincidentally, after completely eliminating the black gas, Wu Ming also restrained the enormous power of the origin dragon out of self-preservation. As a result, Wu Ming's rationality also returned. What the hell is this? Damn it, that bastard Morgan Le Fay. Wu Ming's huge dragon claw slammed on the ground, scattering dust and gravel. I don't know where Yggdrasil went. Fortunately, I swallowed X silver. Although Wu Ming's rationality had disappeared, his memory was fine. Wu Ming clearly remembered swallowing the sword and losing the spear. Forget it, it's my noble artifact anyway. As long as I'm in this era, I'll definitely be able to find it. Let's take it slow and treat it as a long-awaited trip. Wu Ming stretched but realized that the dragon's body was not easy to stretch. I almost forgot that I'd become a dragon. Looks like a monster's journey is about to happen. Ha ha ha. Wu Ming seemed to have thought of something and laughed happily. As expected of me. After completely adapting to a human's life and body, I can still be so happy after becoming a dragon. Yes, this should be me as the origin dragon. Wu Ming got up and walked towards the entrance of the cave. Whoosh! The noisy wind constantly whistled around Wu Ming. Swish! Wu Ming spread his huge dragon wings. Wu Ming's dragon wings were like a work of art. They were noble, gorgeous, and inviolable. Whoosh! With a flap of his wings, Wu Ming soared into the sky and flew into the distance. Wu Ming flew unscrupulously in the sky. Because he was a dragon, there weren't any beasts that didn't have eyes to attack Wu Ming. Feeling the whistling wind around him and looking at the spectacular scene on the ground, Wu Ming couldn't help but exclaim. This feels great. Ha ha ha. Wu Ming continued to make one movement after another in the air and never got tired of it. After playing for a while, Wu Ming saw a city. After thinking for a while, he flew down. The citizens in the city noticed a black dot approaching in the sky. They gathered together curiously until they realized that it was a giant dragon. Dragon. It's a dragon. Quick. Everyone, leave. The citizens ran away in panic. The soldiers also helped to command and report to their superiors. Wu Ming landed on the square in the center of the city. A huge wave of air rushed around. Whoosh! Many people who didn't retreat in time were thrown around. Wu Ming looked at the panicked people and the surrounding buildings. He wanted to see what era it was. In the end, after looking for a long time, Wu Ming could only conclude that it was an era earlier than King Arthur. He didn't know anything else. Child. Suddenly, a scream came from behind Wu Ming. At the same time, Wu Ming felt something crawling on his tail. Wu Ming looked back. It was a child of 2 or 3 years old. The child's mother seemed to have panicked because of Wu Ming's arrival, causing the child to run onto Wu Ming's tail. Wuming lifted his tail and moved it to his mouth. Just when everyone thought that the dragon was going to eat the child and the mother screamed in pain, Wuming rubbed his huge dragon face against the child. He, Wuming's rubbing made the child laugh. Wuming moved his tail to the top of his head. The child climbed onto Wuming's head and hugged Wuming's dragon horns, giggling. Everyone then realized that the dragon in front of them wasn't as scary as they thought. On the contrary, Wuming, who was accompanied by the child's laughter, appeared unusually sacred. May I ask? Lord Dragon God, can you return my child to me? The mother also saw that the sacred dragon in front of her didn't seem to have any intention of hurting or eating people, so she mustered up her courage and went forward to ask. Wuming extended his dragon tail and the child playing with the dragon horns on Wuming's head obediently climbed up. Wuming moved long way down and moved in front of the mother. Thank you for not hurting my child. Thank you, the mother hurriedly hugged the child and thanked him while crying. The people around them also heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed, but they still didn't let down their guard. After all, even if the dragon in front of them was friendly and sacred, they couldn't guarantee that it wouldn't suddenly go berserk. Wuming saw that the people around him were slowly calming down, so he directly opened his mouth and asked. Can you ask your king to talk to me? I have something to ask him. Suddenly, there was a deathly silence around them. The people didn't expect the dragon in front of them to speak at all. After all, dragons were a type of magical beast. They had never seen a magical beast that could speak human language. It was already surprising enough that it didn't hurt people. Honorable Dragon. Lord Dragon, we have already sent someone to inform His Majesty the King. His Majesty the King should be here soon. Please wait a moment, said a braver soldier. At this time, a group of people came from afar. The leader was a man who looked to be in the prime of his life and had the temperament of a king. Wuming guessed that this should be the king. After he dismounted, the soldier who spoke to Wuming hurriedly ran to him and told him everything that happened just now. After the soldier finished speaking, he motioned for the soldier to leave and then walked to Wuming. Honorable Lord Dragon, I'm the Uruk King Lugalbanda of this city. May I ask why you're looking for me, said the man named Lugalbanda. I want to form a contract with you, Wuming said calmly. What? Lugalbanda was stunned on the spot. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.